Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 567. The Gathering. Okay, I just need to continue hitting her with the Unity gun, and her light mana will slowly dwindle. Michael's plan of attack was simple. Use Bo's own ability against her. Since she needed to implement a part of her soul into her creations, this meant that she'd have to juggle between protecting herself or her constructs. And with the drone stalking in the sidelines and ready to strike, he would be able to slowly whittle down her defenses. This was the only path he could see. After all, he knew that her 6th-stage diva cultivation was something that he couldn't fight against head-on. He raised his hand, his finger glowing brighter and brighter as he began to concentrate Unity into a small space. Bo, still bleeding, used her cleaver knife to slice off a piece of bark from a tree and paste it onto herself. Soon the bark became part of her own body, patching up the 2 gunshots she received. She looked up at Michael and commended his power. Your mysterious powers and your flying weapon is praiseworthy. But it's not going to be enough to defeat me, she declared proudly. Just then the giant Ursa Grizzla raised its porridge soup snout high up in the air and bellowed a roar, creating a shockwave that propagated throughout the entire pocket dimension. And in just a few seconds the ground suddenly shook. Michael looked around, wondering if it was simply an earthquake that was causing the tremors. But as he felt it beneath his feet, he realized that the shaking was irregular and non-uniform. It reminded him of when he was at a concert and thousands of people were jumping chaotically to the sound of the music. Don't tell me. His eyes widened as he used his supreme talent to peer through his surroundings, looking for signs of any light mana in the area. In the near distance, he saw it. He saw them. Hundreds of monsters, big, small, and gigantic, were running towards their direction with nothing but crazed purpose in their eyes. Once he looked at their body language, he realized that they were looking towards the Ursa Grizzla as if they were being called by the monster. Okay, hundreds of monsters. But they're just in the 4-star to 5-star range. I can deal with that, he thought. He was about to conjure up more magic animals in the air when all of a sudden an even bigger tremor erupted from the ground. The force was almost enough to make him trip and lose his balance. This time he didn't have to use his supreme talent to know what was happening. Beyond the trees, he saw colossal beasts similar to ancient dinosaurs rampage through the forest. These monsters didn't just smash their way through the trees, they also demolished and feasted on the smaller and weaker monsters gathering around them. The crowd above were just as flustered as Michael. They didn't think Bo would be crazy enough to summon the entirety of the monsters in the pocket dimension. Why did she do this when they're so close to the glass dome? Didn't she know that the 8-star monsters resided surrounding it? Now all of them are converging on their location. Maybe that's her plan. She's using those monsters to mess with Michael. It makes sense. Although that white beam of his is powerful, it can only be fired once every few seconds at most. And even if he has that mithril weapon, he won't be able to defend against tens of 8-star monsters coming his way. As expected of Bo, she immediately thought of a way to counteract Michael's advantages. Michael won't be able to fire his Unity gun towards her if he was busy getting chased by beasts from all directions. And although she won't be exempted from the beasts, she could use her ability to protect herself and even use the monsters to her advantage. One dog-like monster with a very defined bone structure skidded on the ground as it reached Michael's location. It opened its mouth sideways, uttering out a shrilling sound and revealing thousands of teeth around its mouth. Michael immediately used an air jet on the soles of his feet, taking off away from the dog monster. And just as he did that, its body disappeared and reappeared right from where Michael was standing with its mouth open and just a few inches away from taking a bite out of him. Before he could even take a break, another gigantic monster that looked like a black rooster with a Trek's head appeared behind him. It pecked towards him with speeds almost enough to break the sound barrier. His absolute Unity defense activated, resisting against the 8-star monster's beak for a brief moment and giving him the chance to teleport out into safety. I'm completely surrounded, he realized. All around him were 8-star monsters that were hungry to get a taste of him. Although on the bright side, Bo was also occupied with her own group of 8-star monsters needing to jump atop her Ursa Grizzla and command it to protect her from the beasts. Just then 2 of the gorilla-like 8-star colossal monsters jumped up and tried to grab him from the air. He raised his Unity gun and aimed it at them, with the drone floating opposite him and targeting the other. As his shot powered up, the beasts seemed to have felt the power of his Unity. Their instincts kicked in and they immediately used each other as a platform and jumped sideways out of harm's way. His shot missed, hitting nothing but the ground. They're a lot faster than me, so they can easily dodge it. The solution to that was simple. Just pause them. The dog monster lunged at him with its mouth wide open, with its intelligence high enough to know that his Unity gun was still on cooldown. He reached down his pockets and threw the switch onto the monster's perked-up ears. As soon as it latched onto its skin, the beast paused in midair, as if its time had completely stopped. The tip of his finger finally glowed with the power of Unity. The beast was eventually able to wrestle control back on its body, but it was too late. The Unity gun shot directly towards its head, burning through its thick skull. The dog monster fell to the ground, its limbs shaking. But it was resilient. Michael saw that its light mana had only depleted by a quarter, meaning that he had to shoot it 3 more times to truly incapacitate it for good. And if he was just fighting a single monster, then it was easy. But unfortunately, the 5 other 8-star monsters wouldn't give him that chance. They were smart, and they knew that they couldn't let him solo them individually. They lunged towards him, all coming from different directions. Their eyes were wary of the Unity gun, and the switch he used to injure the dog monster. He tried to move out of the way, but they were way too fast. Their rabid mouths and sharp claws converged towards him, with the only thing defending him was his Unity shield. Chapter 568, 8-Star Monsters. Chapter 568, 8-Star Monsters. His absolute Unity shield popped for the first time as it took on the combined forces of 5 8-star monsters. Still, it gave enough of a deterrent for Michael to teleport down into the ground, using the cover of the thick leaves of the trees to hide himself from the monsters. Fighting them one by one is almost impossible. I have to take them out at the same time. The only thing that could create enough damage towards the monsters in one big explosion was none other than the Unity grenade from his drone. But he had to be careful about how he used this. First of all, launching the Unity grenade was very slow, unlike the Unity gun, and even that was being dodged by the 8-star monsters. And secondly, knowing how intelligent those monsters were, he knew that he only had one shot at this. Once they knew about its destructive prowess, he wouldn't be able to use it again without them escaping before he could set it up. After thinking about it some more, a plan finally took shape in his mind. And just in time too, as the monsters finally turned their heads towards him. They pounced at him as if he was a mouse let loose in the forest. But unbeknownst to them, a drone was hovering above them. They were so concentrated on Michael that they neglected to look at the puny drone. Just as all 6 8-star colossal beasts, including the injured dog monster, rushed towards Michael, the drone opened its underside. Suddenly 6 iron switches were released down into their paths, each hitting an unsuspecting beast on their humongous bodies. In a single moment, all 8-star monsters paused into a small cluster. And soon after that, the drone unveiled its giant barrel from its frame and aimed down at the center of the monster's cluster. With a single thought, Michael released the Unity grenade into the center. The ball of pure Unity fell gracefully into the ground, with the beasts around it still frozen solid from the ability switches. It was in that instant that Bo suddenly felt her hairs stand on end. She didn't have to know what was happening to know that something dangerous was about to come. She immediately used her Ursa Grizzla to get away from Michael as far as possible. But they couldn't have moved too far as the grenade finally touched down into the ground. At the moment of contact, a bright white light bursted out into a dome which grew larger and larger near the speed of light. It wasn't long before anything and everything around the pocket dimension was blinded from the explosion. But this grenade wasn't just a flashbang. Soon after the burst of light, the concentration of extreme energy in the Unity grenade exploded out into cataclysmic proportions, destroying a large portion of the ground and reducing it into a giant crater. A shockwave soon followed, creating a furious wind that uprooted trees and lifted large boulders from the ground. Bo's Ursa Grizzla was toppled into the ground before skidding uncontrollably outwards just from the force of the blast. A few seconds later, the shockwave subsided, leaving the entire pocket dimension as silent as the night. Bo peeked out of the Ursa Grizzla's head and saw the magnitude of destruction that the grenade had caused. Everything was in chaos, with all the trees in a wide radius around the blast having been toppled to the ground. As for the 5 8-star monsters that were coming towards Michael, one was reduced into nothingness while the other 4 were injured beyond repair. Their tough bodies and resilient skin were burned into a black crisp. They were dead on the spot after feeling the ravaging effects of Unity destroy their bodies. Somehow Michael was able to kill 8-star monsters within one fell swoop. How is this possible? Even the crowd watching from above were shocked. At first they thought that this was where Michael's journey would end. Being surrounded by 5 8-star monsters could be considered a death sentence in this game. But in a complete upset, Michael used his flying weapon again to change the tides of the battle. They thought they knew the capabilities of Michael's mithril weapon, with it being able to use the same powerful beam as he could. But as it turned out, it was hiding an even more destructive power. The wizards from the magic tower were unable to contain their curiosity. They were scholars. They were dying to figure out the mystery behind Michael's weapon and his power. They wanted to go down into the pocket dimension and personally ask him to explain how it worked. Seriously, what is that flying weapon of his? How could such a small weapon even conjure up an explosion of that power? The size of its blast should only be equal to a 6-star spell, so the 8-star monsters should theoretically be able to survive it without a single scratch. From their expert opinion, the monsters would only incur fatal injuries if the explosion was big enough to destroy the whole pocket dimension. But their surprise didn't end there. Someone with a high sensitivity to mana realized what had happened to the area of the blast in the aftermath. "There's no mana," he exclaimed. The explosion created a void of space where there's no mana at all. All the wizards and mages gasped. It was like they were seeing their nightmare in person. Having no access to mana would be like having no air to breathe. It was their greatest fear. How is this even possible? How can a spell made out of mana create a manaless zone? Thankfully, there was someone here who had a clue as to how it was possible. "It's made out of the same power as that beam. Contains all 8 elements," he muttered. If that beam focused on penetration power, this explosion focused on destructive power. And that power was able to destroy the natural defenses of the 8-star monsters. Not only that, but the explosion was so strong that it basically annihilated all the surrounding mana in the air as well. I'm guessing that mana wouldn't be replenished in that area for some time. All the wizards and mages in their room gulped. After learning this, they wouldn't dare fight Michael Unionon. Michael floated up, overlooking the crater he had created. Though he failed to reduce the monsters down into their very last atom, he still eliminated them in the end. Just then, out of the corner of his eyes, he saw the colossal Ursa Grizzla charging at him on all 4 limbs. He quickly turned his aim towards it, shooting it in the head and destroying a small bit of Bo's light mana inside it. His drone also reloaded its unity gun, ready to shoot the charging bear. This was the only monster he had to worry about. Meanwhile, Bo was still dealing with her own group of 8-star monsters. But as he reloaded his unity gun, he realized that Bo was nowhere to be seen. He looked around only to see her attacking the 6 remaining 8-star monsters on her side. Above her was her Frankenstein chef diva ready to cook. Chapter 569, Bo's Monsters. Bo faced 6 8-star monsters with nothing but her frilly pink dress and her mithril relic cleaver knife. One of the elephant monsters with spiraling tusks charged towards her. But instead of running away, she faced the attack with just a simple slice from her weapon. Such a small gesture should have been useless against a behemoth like this monster. However, above Bo was her Frankenstein chef diva, who was moving the knife and the flat pan around as if it was mimicking a real chef. As Bo's knife met with the elephant monster's tusks, her knife easily sliced through the bone as if it was butter. The slice continued to penetrate through the tusk and towards the very elephant itself. The durability and defense of an 8-star monster was nothing when faced against an ability. Bo's knife sliced through the elephant, horizontally separating its legs from its body. But strangely enough, the monster didn't die, nor did it look injured. That wasn't her goal after all. She simply needed a way to get inside. She tapped her knife to her own chest, taking out a piece of visible light mana from her own soul, and flicking it towards the slit on the elephant's body. As soon as the mode of mana entered the elephant's body, a huge change occurred within the beast. Its eyes trembled, forcing the monster to blink. And once it opened its eyes, it had suddenly transformed into a piece of frosting. More and more parts of the elephant's body continued to morph and change shape, becoming a crude stitching of different pastries and foods. It had become like the Frankenstein chef diva. She had turned the 8-star monster into her own creation, giving her full control over it. And this wasn't the only one. The other 5 monsters were already turning into monsters made out of bread, cream, and sugar. This was how she got her army in the first place. She used the beasts and monsters inhabiting the pocket dimension and used their bodies to create constructs under her control. And it looked like this time she was going to get the strongest monsters on her side. A total of 6 8-star monsters became completely subservient to Bo. "I would have had more constructs, but I didn't expect you to kill all 5 of them before I could get them under my control," Bo said to Michael as the elephant monster used its trunks to get her on top of it. "Now I see why everyone considers her as the strongest rising 6. She's practically unbeatable." He used his unity gun to shoot at the elephant monster's head since it was the slowest. But even so, it ducked under his shot and charged at him with tusks made out of frosting. He reached down his pockets, taking out an iron switch and placing it squarely on his palms. At this point, Bo knew about his switch. So speed was the only way he was going to hit the monster. He conjured up a magic circle and created a spell unlike anyone had ever seen before. A solid earth chunk manifested in the air, which suddenly burst into flames as he injected fire mana into it. The chunk immediately glowed red hot as it got heated up into 1,000 degrees Celsius. Eventually, it turned into a malleable liquid material which got telepathically molded into the shape and mechanics of something he saw from his previous life. The liquid morphed into an open cylindrical shell with the same diameter as his switch. Anyone from Earth would immediately recognize it as a weapon meant for wars. It was a cannon. He loaded up one of the switches onto the barrel and injected it with the 4 basic mana elements: lightning, poison, dark, and light. The combination created a miniature explosion that launched the switch towards the elephant monster. Its speed was a surprise for all people, including Bo, so it successfully attached itself towards the monster's head. The 8-star beast stopped in place for a moment, giving Michael a chance to escape from its charge. He teleported out and charged up his Unity gun, pointing it at its body. However, just a millisecond later the switch popped out of the elephant's forehead and fell to the ground. His switch could only stop it by a very brief instance. Damn. That's the difference between 4th stage and 6th stage. Because those beasts were now under Bo's control, they were imbued with her own ability. And despite his unusually strong diva power, there was a limit as to who he could defeat. But even though he was disappointed with the results, Bo couldn't help but widen her eyes as she saw her control over the monster stop for a brief moment. How? He's just in the 4th stage of body formation. His ability shouldn't even work on her. Period. Yet it did. It was only for a few milliseconds, but it still overpowered it regardless. She was forced to consider Michael with a lot more cautiousness than before. She raised her cleaver knife in the air and commanded all 6 8-star monsters to bombard Michi with their strongest attacks. A sense of foreboding caused her to hurry. She wanted to defeat Michael before something bad happened. The monsters attacked Michael with coordination and synchronization, making them a lot more dangerous than the other beasts he encountered. With Bo at the helm, they strategically hunted Michael down and gave him no chance to escape. As soon as he tried to teleport out with his shadow ability, there would be a panther monster lurking in the forest ready to strike at him whenever he reappeared. Even his drone was getting hunted. The colossal wasp monster used its giant stingers made out of frosting to hunt the drone and prevent it from using its Unity gun. And since he was controlling the drone manually with his supreme talent, he had to balance his own well-being with his drones at the same time. This can't go on any longer, he thought, as he conjured a lava wall to separate himself from the elephant monster's tusks. If I want to defeat Bo, I need to isolate her from her constructs. The best way to do that was to kill them. Unfortunately, his Unity gun was not meant for an area of effect. Meanwhile, his grenade was still on cooldown. And no matter how many switches he threw at them, they only stopped for a millisecond at most. His abilities were useless against someone stronger than him. But at this moment, an idea popped into his head. What if I used my switches on me? ChatJK4, is it possible? Your idea has merit. Would you like me to formulate a plan on how to best use it to isolate Bo? He didn't even have to reply, as ChatJK4 laid out an extensive plan in his mind. He just had to follow them to the T. First, he raised his hand and used his Unity gun. A bright, blinding light appeared on the tip of his fingers, alerting Bo and her monsters about his impending attack. They quickly went on the defensive, putting some distance away from him. But as the Unity gun reached its peak and shot off, the light suddenly died down with no white beam coming out of his finger. Everyone thought he missed or he made an error. But unbeknownst to them, his target wasn't Bo or her beast. It was a switch. Chapter 570, Missing Shots. And for the next minute, Michael continued missing his shots. He must have done this no less than 20 times in total. Each time his finger would glow with an intense light, reaching a peak before eventually dying down, as if he had just fired off his Unity gun. But strangely enough, there was no beam that fired off. Everyone was perplexed with this uncharacteristic error from Michael. They could have understood it if it happened only once or twice. Even the best made mistakes. But this was the 20th time in a row. Bo, on the other hand, was starting to get suspicious. She didn't know what he was planning, but she didn't like it one bit. She commanded her beasts to hunt him down with even more intensity. Michael activated his Unity gun for one last time, with a switch secretly blocking the tip of his finger. Using this opportunity, the jaguar monster leaped up from beneath the trees and tried to claw at him from both sides, but the drone suddenly put itself in between them and fought against the jaguar's frosted claws. Sparks flew off from the point of contact. The drone eventually got overpowered by the monster's immense power, being thrown down into the ground with force. It landed on the forest floor, creating a 2-feet-deep crater around it. For a moment, Bo thought she'd finally destroyed the drone. But a few seconds later, its propellers buzzed into life and soared into the skies. Even with the power of an 8-star monster powered by an ability, Michael's drone received no scratch at all. This weapon is not simple, she guessed. Its mysterious origin and its unbelievable durability made Bo focused on the drone entirely. She knew Michael's limits, but she didn't know anything about the drone. In her mind, it was the only thing that could change the tides of the battle. Once she incapacitated it, the fight would soon be over. With Michael still occupied with the monsters, she jumped up from the elephant's head and pursued the drone. Mithril relic cleaver knife in hand, she sliced it down towards the drone to split it down the middle. She wanted to see if it could become one of her ingredients. But just as her knife was about to make contact with its frame, a gaseous shadow suddenly emerged from its edges and quickly enveloped its entirety. Not even a second later, the shadows morphed into something bigger. It molded itself to become the shape of a human, into Michael's body. He emerged from the shadows, becoming face to face with Bo with barely a meter in front of them. She quickly reversed her momentum, backing away from him. Her monsters quickly turned around and charged after him. But in that moment he reached down his pockets and spread his prepared switches into the air around them. Using telekinesis, the switches flew to their correct positions in the air and floated in place. Bo looked around and found herself surrounded by a strategic placement of switches. They lined themselves up into a rigid structure. With just a meter in between switches, they formed a cube. Bo didn't like where this was going. For some reason she felt enclosed, as if the walls were closing in on her. But before she could escape, Michael raised his hand and snapped his finger. And immediately the switches flicked into the on position. A bright white light emerged from every single switch in the air. They increased in intensity before shooting off a beam of pure energy outwards. Some beams shot horizontally while the others shot vertically. Eventually they all intersected with one another and created a cubed cage structure using unity beams as his frame. The switches were strategically placed to create a crisscross of unity beams that only very tiny creatures could pass through. This was why he had been shooting off his unity guns at the switch. He was turning them off at the moment it shot towards the switch, preserving a tiny bit of its power. Once it was turned on, the beam would continue to transmit its power in a straight line. And since it was attached to a switch, the beam would continue to be a solid pillar for as long as he had it turned to the on position. With this he created a cage made out of pure unity. Bo's monsters uttered a guttural roar as they saw their creator boxed in with Michael. The elephant monster trumpeted its trunk before charging towards the cage, its frosted trunks ready to tear it to pieces. But as soon as the elephant's tusk made contact with the unity cage, it immediately roared and recoiled in pain. It backed away and looked at its own tusk. What used to be a long coiled horn now became just a small stump on the front of its mouth. The tusks were immediately burned into nothingness just from a brief exposure to the unity cage. Touching the unity bars was like being hit with a unity gun. For an extended period of time, it destroyed anything and everything. The elephant monster warily looked at the cage, with the other beasts also following its lead. They were far too big to get inside it, meaning the battle was now just between Michael and Bo. The crowd were incredibly amazed to see this. Somehow Michael was once again able to flip the situation entirely on its head and gain the upper hand. So that's what he'd been doing this entire time. No wonder those light beams weren't hitting anything. That's a very smart use of his own power and abilities. Bo is completely isolated for the first time. And look at that. His flying weapon fits perfectly in the holes, meaning he can use it to fight against her. Even Bo had to give Michael his due credit. She couldn't help but become more and more interested in Michael as she learned more about him. "You are amazing, you know that?" Bo asked, twirling her blonde hair. "You're the first one to corner me like this." Michael smiled. "I'm honored. Can I also be the first one to defeat you?" Bo hid her chuckle with her hands. "Maybe. But trapping me in here doesn't mean that you defeated me. It just means we'll have to be a little bit handsy with each other." He ignored her innuendo and raised his unity gun towards her. In response, she took out her cleaver knife and twirled it around her hand. The figure of the Frankenstein chef diva appeared above her, ready to cook her next meal. He manifested his own diva, showing the two complete futuristic mechanical floating arms in the air. She looked at his diva and was even more impressed. "Already in the 4th stage, yet you have only manifested your diva's arms? Is that bad?" he asked her. "Bad? No, it just means that your diva has a lot left to grow. The slower a diva matures, the stronger they become in the future," she said with a smile. "Just a little bit of advice. You should continue fighting with your diva more. It will help you grow faster." Chapter 571. Bo's Power. Bo looked around herself and couldn't help but be astounded at his powers. She moved over as close as she could to the unity beam and lightly tapped her finger on it. Her finger sizzled with her skin, incurring a second-degree burn, even though she only made contact with the beam for less than a millisecond. Getting out of this cage wasn't as simple as she thought. "Your abilities are amazing. Can pause an object's time and momentum in a complete halt. But I can see that this is not the limit of your diva," she said. "Do you know what's the point of the body formation realm?" Michael only had a surface-level understanding of diva cultivation, but he knew the answer. "It's the realm where magnetics get to understand their diva." Bo nodded. "That's right. This is an important stage for both you and me. The better you understand your diva, the easier you'll have it in the later stages. So I have to ask you, why are you not listening to your diva?" He looked at her confused. "What are you talking about?" She pointed at the two arms above his head. "You're not listening to it properly." "I'm trying to," he insisted. "But you're listening with your ears, not with your heart. That's literally where your Godforge pieces are located." Of course, it was easier said than done. How could he listen to something not using his ears? "Then tell me how." Bo wagged her fingers. "I can't. I'm not gaining anything by giving you a shortcut to the answer. Of course, there's an easy solution to that if you want. Come with me and we'll work together. I'm willing to give you half of my company and we can grow it together. I'm sure that with the two of us side by side, we can someday reach the big leagues and join the major factions. And if you want a little bit more than that, then I'm willing to give that to you as well. If you agree, then I'll help you listen to your diva. He had to admit, just by a little bit he was tempted to agree to her terms. Not with the innuendo part, of course, but with the working together part. However, he knew that he was just getting impatient with himself. Being a part of the pyramidic cuisine wasn't worth it. Thanks for the offer, but no. Bo shrugged, not taking the rejection seriously. Well then I guess I'll just have to show you what you're missing out. She pointed the mithril relic cleaver knife in his direction, with her diva mimicking her movements completely. Her body glowed with a yellow aura just as the feminine Frankenstein chef diva above her started to move its knife and its flat pan like a real chef. She was using her ability. Michael immediately raised his hand with the tip of his finger glowing with the power of unity. With such a small and cramped space, the advantage was on his side. She would have even less time to evade from the beam. As his unity gun powered up, both of Bo's hands began to glow in two different colors. One was red and one was white. Once the power in his hands reached a peak, he immediately shot it off towards Bo and aimed directly for her heart. Its speed was almost instantaneous to a normal person's perspective. Even as the beam traveled towards Bo, her eyes didn't seem like it had even processed what was happening in the moment. But just then the Frankenstein diva chef suddenly moved forward, bending down towards Bo and using its flat cooking pan to protect her heart from the unity gun. Suddenly a bright white light emerged from Bo's left hand, forming a circular shield that coincided with the diva's flat cooking pan. The unity beam clashed towards the circular white light with their point of contact, creating a tremendously bright flash that blinded everyone around it. By the time Michael processed what happened, he saw his unity beam nowhere to be seen. Bo was uninjured. What just happened? Even the crowd was confused. The speed at which everything unfolded was far too fast for them to keep up. The only people who understood what happened were those magnetics from the major factions. The Rising Six were also clueless. Rena, Erlos, Reptar, and Tenzing only saw a blur before everything flashed a bright light. How did she not get hit by Michael's beam? I saw her diva move, but I don't know what it did. Her abilities shouldn't have a defensive power that can defend against Michael. All of them were confused. Except one. Fim looked down at the pocket dimension with wide eyes. Even though he only saw a blur just like the rest of them, he immediately recognized what he saw. That's mine, he exclaimed. The other Rising Six turned to him confused. That's my light ability. She is using my ability. Fim's ability allowed him to create solid light that could be formed into anything his heart desired. Could be a sword, a hammer, and even a shield. How is that even possible? Erlos asked him. I don't know, Fim muttered. But that's my ability, there's no doubt about it. My light speed is also near instantaneous. That's how she's able to defend against Michael's beam in such a short time frame. Just then they saw Bo's hands start to glow with a bright light before it formed into a solid shield that she wielded on her left hand. This essentially proved Fim's claims. Everyone who knew Bo was shocked at this new revelation. They thought they knew what she was capable of. But this was a completely new power that they had never seen before. She got stronger. Michael looked at the white shield in Bo's hands with confusion. That's Fim's ability, he said to her. This time Bo was surprised. How did you know? You've never met the guy, right? Of course he didn't tell her that he was spying on them earlier. He had used his drone vision to scout ahead and saw her fighting Fim and Tenzing. That was how he knew about Fim's ability. But yes, you're right. This is Fim's ability. Do you like it? It's from my new ability. I recently found out that not only can I use ingredients to strengthen constructs, I can also use them to strengthen myself. Michael used his supreme talent and looked at the light mana signatures in her body. At the center of her body was a large and dense grouping of light mana. Meanwhile, the rest of the light mana in her body only came in sparse groups, except for her hands. On her left hand, he saw a completely different grouping of light mana that was structurally different from what she had from the rest of her body. It was the same with her right hand. It was also a completely new arrangement of light mana particles, meaning that this wasn't hers. She can use other magnetics light mana as ingredients to reinforce her own body. That's her new ability. Chapter 572. Frankenstein Bo. Her female Frankenstein chef diva made much more sense now. As long as she got the light mana from anyone in the world, then she could essentially make her own body as a collection of other people's powers. And before he could try and assess her powers, he saw her raise her palms. And before he knew it, his absolute unity defense activated and resisted against a pillar of solid light coming from her hands. That's fast. He wasn't even able to react. If it wasn't for his prismatic shield, then he would have no doubt been hit by the light. What is that defense of yours? Bo complained, puffing up her cheeks. You're just full of overpowered skills, aren't you? Michael raised his hand, creating another unity gun on the tip of his finger. But while it was still powering up, Bo raised her hand and shot another solid pillar of light, hitting the same spot as before. His absolute unity defense wobbled for a brief second, but the mana in the air immediately replenished the unity it lost from the attack. I can't break your shields. While she was talking, Michael sneakily commanded his drone to move behind her. And while she was distracted, he commanded it to fire a single shot of unity gun. This time the gun shot off without a hitch. What is your defense made out of? But at the very moment where she would have been hit, her light shield disappeared out of her left hand and reappeared behind her, perfectly shielding her back from the unity gun. She immediately looked behind her, surprised that the drone was able to sneak up on her. How was she able to react? His first thought was that she was simply just that fast. However, the fact that she was still talking and completely unaware of the drone up until the unity gun was about to hit her body disproved that entirely. She didn't know the beam was about to hit her. She didn't even know the drone was there, despite that she was able to manipulate her light shield to protect her from harm. Wait a minute. It was then that he remembered that it wasn't just her who moved. It was the diva above her. After replaying the video, it is safe to conclude that Bo's diva was the first one to react to the unity beam. Thankfully, ChatJK4 played a slowed-down replay of the video for him to see what happened. At the moment when his drone shot the unity beam, the female Frankenstein chef diva quickly turned around. It noticed the beam coming towards Bo and immediately positioned its flat frying pan towards the trajectory of the unity beam. A few moments later, the light shield in Bo's left hand disappeared from her hands and reappeared in a flash behind her. The diva moved first and Bo just moved after it. This revelation was mind-blowing to him. He always thought that divas were just simple projections that were more akin to a statue rather than a living being. But this completely disproved that. The diva protected Bo even without her asking for it, meaning that it was sentient at the very least. He felt like he was on the brink of discovering something after learning this. However, Bo didn't give him any time for contemplation. What are you spacing around for? She raised her cleaver knife and cut off a small circle in the air. Her original ability activated, allowing the air to become as tangible and as solid as an ingredient. Her right hand began to glow with a red aura. That's a different set of light mana, he observed. I'm guessing you also got Tenzing's power on your right hand. Correct. Bo said, flinging her curly blonde hair. I'm surprised that you got it so quickly. After defeating them, I was able to take a sample from the souls of their body and implement it onto myself. To be honest, I wasn't even planning on showing this power yet, but you forced my hand high. And with Tenzing's ability on her right hand, she grabbed the ball of air and grasped it tightly on her palms. Immediately, the air ball's gravity increased by an enormous amount, so much so that a small black sphere appeared on the ball of air. This was none other than a black hole, one of Tenzing's proudest abilities. And before he could react, she quickly turned around and threw it towards the drone. The black hole continued to consume more and more air particles from its surroundings. Its intense gravitational field started to pull the drone closer, with its force becoming stronger and stronger as the drone fell deeper into its orbit. Michael was able to control its flight to prevent its descent into the black hole, but its propellers weren't that powerful enough to completely escape the gravitational field of the miniature black hole. It was stuck there, unable to move or else risk getting eaten by a gravitational hole in space. While he was concentrating, Bo took this chance to create another ball of air. And with a simple touch from her right hand, the ball turned into another miniature black hole. This time she threw it towards Michael. After seeing what happened with his drone, he quickly made space between him and the black hole. But because of its intense gravitational field, his movement inside the unity cage became much more limited. He couldn't go anywhere near the left or risk getting caught in the black hole's orbit. I don't have to worry about the black holes, but that pillar of light is troublesome. I can't react to it. It's too fast. But maybe I don't have to. He saw Bo raise up her hand towards him. Even before seeing her use her ability, he casted his magic. And in that same moment, Bo's solid pillar of light shot out from her palms, reaching him at insanely fast speeds. But just as it was about to hit his body, his entire being turned into a gaseous shadow that teleported out of harm's way. His solution to the pillar of light was simple. As long as he paid attention to her palms, then he could easily guess where she was aiming. Impressive, Michael. That was how I dodged against Fim's ability as well. It's a weakness that is really easy to exploit once you know the secret. Bo then raised her hand again, getting ready to release another shot of her pillar of light. But this time she wasn't aiming at him. She was aiming out into the far left. But I have a workaround for this, she said, smirking. It's the reason why I chose to fight against Fim and Tenzing in the first place. I think their abilities are perfect for each other. She released the solid light outwards, reaching towards none other than the black hole she put just a few seconds before. The solid light just grazed past the event horizon of the black hole. And just as it was about to go past it, the light suddenly bent into a curve. Chapter 573. Focus on hearing. The intense curvature of space, due to the immense gravitational field of the black hole, caused light itself to bend around its orbit. The light beam curved perfectly towards Michael, hitting his absolute unity defense for the third time in a row. This interaction between two abilities was so unexpected that not even their original owners knew that this was possible. It was Bo's intelligence and her creativity that allowed this wonderful synergy of abilities. Even though she only spent a small amount of time with these powers, she was able to use them with the same mastery as their original owners. Bo proved why she was first place in the Rising 6 ranking. She had solved the only weakness of the solid light. With the bending of the space, Michael wouldn't be able to predict where it would go based on the direction of her arms. I have to destroy those, he decided. He quickly powered up another unity gun, aiming it towards the black hole. His finger burst out with a bright light, emitting a ray of unity towards the black hole. The immense gravitational field tried to swallow the beam towards its bottomless pit. However, the equally intense energy of unity obliterated everything around the black hole, destroying the particles that kept it fed. Without particles to consume, the black hole eventually collapsed onto itself. But in that same moment, Bo used her cleaver and carved 3 more balls of air in front of her. And with a single touch, each of them were converted into black holes as intense as the first one. She grabbed all of them and threw them towards Michael. He teleported out of the way, reappearing opposite them. But this gave Bo enough time to shoot another pillar of solid light, once again aiming for the black hole she just threw. The beam grazed past one, curving its trajectory perfectly to miss the second black hole, just enough to once again let its intense gravitational field alter its course for a final time. It shot towards Michael, hitting his absolute unity defense again. I can't destroy those black holes fast enough. She'll just create more while I power up my unity gun. He powered up another beam, this time hitting the black hole that got his drone captive. The unity annihilated the gravity field, causing the drone to regain its freedom. However, at the same moment this happened, Bo carved up more air balls from her surroundings to transform them into black holes. She raised her cleaver knife and began dicing the air into very small air spheres, each one only as small as a grape. She grabbed all of them by her right hand, transforming them all into even tinier black holes. With her frilly pink dress twirling, she threw all of her mini black holes into the air, inundating the cage with gravitational fields. Now these black holes were too small to do any real damage to Michael. But that wasn't the point. Bo just wanted more black holes for her pillar of light to curve into. It's even harder to predict where the shot is going now. And just like he thought, Bo raised her hand again, pointing towards a random direction and shooting off a pillar of solid light. The light zigzagged through the air, curving randomly through the starry collection of black holes inside the cage. It shot towards Michael's back, piercing a hole in his absolute unity defense for a moment before regenerating back up into full health. I have to find a way to dodge those pillars of light. My defense can only last as long as there's mana in the air. His first thought was to have ChatJK4 to use the current physics model of the world to predict where the shot was going to go. However, the curvature of space was completely random and probably controlled by Bo herself, making it impossible to predict. She knew her advantages more than anyone. She continued to fire off beams of solid light towards him, working on whittling down his defenses one shot at a time. Meanwhile, he was unable to react to any of the shots at all. He would only feel it when his prismatic shield activated. He and his drone fired off shots of unity gun whenever they can to reduce the number of black holes in the area, but Bo would just create far more than he could destroy in the same amount of time. At this point, he realized that he wasn't going to avoid the pillar of light no matter what he did. He needed something else. Bo's diva was able to react to my unity gun before she could. Maybe my diva could do that as well. He stopped dodging and stayed in one place, surprising Bo. Since he couldn't dodge it anyway, it's useless to spend energy on trying to escape it. So floating in the air, he crossed his legs and closed his eyes. He was going to concentrate as much as he could to finally listen to what his diva was trying to tell him. Did you give up? Bo asked, shooting off another pillar of light, zigzagging its way towards Michael's prismatic shield. She was seeing signs of his defense starting to waver. She didn't know what he was doing, but this was her chance to finally break through his shield. Meanwhile, Michael blocked out anything from the outside world and just focused on his own thoughts. Her diva could move independently from her own. You can do it too, he said to his diva. But there was no answer. Come on. How do I listen to you? Still no response. She said, listen from the heart. What is my heart saying? But he could feel nothing but his own heartbeat. Upon getting no indication that there even was a diva he was talking to, he was getting a little bit impatient. After all, he could hear the sounds of Bo's pillars chipping away at his unity shield at this very moment. His first instinct was to open his eyes and try to dodge and fight her assault. He was tempted to break his concentration and defend. Wait. Maybe that's the problem. I've been trying to solve this by myself when I should have been listening to my instincts. Michael decided to let go. He let himself fall deeper and deeper into his own concentration until he entered the void of his own consciousness. In here he saw nothing but an endless darkness around him. He couldn't see anything. He couldn't hear anything. And he couldn't even feel his own body. He was just a soul passing through the void. He let go of his thoughts of communication with the diva. All this time he'd been trying to talk with it, forcing it to converse with him. But he realized now that this was akin to trying to get someone to talk while also talking over them and not giving them a chance to speak. So now he just let his mind wander. He wasn't going to think. And it was in that moment that a spark of instinct entered his mind. Chapter 574. On the edge. He tried to follow it and let it flow through his body. However, his own thoughts began to muddle the instinct and caused it to slip away. His body twitched, leaning to the side by a tiny inch. And in that moment Bo's pillar of light hit the prismatic shield near his shoulder. Even though his movement was small, Bo noticed it immediately. This caught her off guard, causing her to pause and stare at Michael. She had aimed specifically for his chest, but his small twitch caused the pillar of light to miss the target by a few centimeters. Coincidence? For a second there she thought he found the perfect timing to dodge out of the way from her attack. Alarmed, she kept on shooting her pillars towards his prismatic shield. She was getting closer and closer to piercing through it. She found that the regeneration of his defenses was getting slower and slower the more times that part of the shield was hit. So as long as she targeted his chest area, she'd be able to break through it. She raised her left palm, releasing a bright light that curved through the black holes and charged towards Michael's chest. But once again he twitched. At the very last second it seemed like he got the right timing to dodge out of the way. And this time his movement was a lot bigger than before. Not only that, but for a brief moment she saw his diva start to raise its two hands. She knew what this looked like. This looked exactly like what she was doing before. This was diva communication. Divas were a lot stronger, faster, and more powerful than a human. So they could react to threats much faster than their owners. Some magnetics used this to their advantage by tapping into their diva's instincts. As long as they could understand what the diva wanted to do, then they could essentially use it to dodge extremely fast attacks. Michael looked like he was doing exactly that. No way. That's not possible, she thought. He and his diva were way too inexperienced to be doing this. Not only that, but this type of development should only happen during practice when there was absolute silence and focus, not when fighting against somebody else. She raised her palm again, shooting a pillar of light that directly traveled to his chest with no black hole slowing down its speed. And just then Michael's body shifted to the side, allowing the light to just graze through his absolute unity defense. He's connecting with his diva, she realized. But despite him reacting fast enough to the pillar of light, it still tore through his prismatic shield, breaking off like pieces of glass. His defenses would need a few seconds before it could regain its health again. But Bo didn't need a few. She just needed one. She shot the solid white light directly in his heart. The beam passed through several black holes, and this time its gravitational pull didn't curve its trajectory. Instead, it sped up its velocity with a technique called a gravitational slingshot. She was going to finally hit him with an ability, but just then Michael's diva moved. It extended its right hand and held it straight out. And suddenly an invisible shockwave emanated from Michael's body. The shockwave hit the beam and stopped it in its tracks. For a moment Bo felt her control over her own ability start to falter. She lost control. But the moment only lasted for a very short amount of time, not even lasting a couple of milliseconds. But it was enough. Michael's body teleported out of the beam's trajectory just as it regained its original momentum. As soon as the other magnetics in the crowd saw this, their eyes widened with realization. He connected with his diva. He just found out about this just a few minutes ago. Reptar gasped, remembering how they had to teach Michael that the sound he'd been hearing was his own diva. He's only in the 4th stage. Even the 6th stage is early when connecting with a diva. It doesn't even have a head yet, just 2 arms. No one could believe that Michael was connecting with his diva in the middle of a fight. That was insane. But while everybody was focused on his connection with his diva, some of the more experienced magnetics in the major factions focused on something else entirely. It just happened for a very brief moment, not even enough for the blink of an eye, but it happened. A shockwave emanated from Michael and stopped the beam right on its path, even without using that strange iron block of his. Alaric stared at Michael, disbelief written on his face. He's close. He's about to awaken a new ability. He knew that as a magnetic came closer and closer to a breakthrough, their power would spike up for a very brief moment. And it was exactly what he saw down below. Michael's times-top power extended out of his body with its increased power enough to even outpower Bo's 6th stage ability for a brief moment. All the other magnetics like Alaric had their eyes glued to the pocket dimension shock written on their faces. Michael finally opened his eyes, looking at his own hands with satisfaction painted on his face. It worked. For the first time he connected with his diva. Felt like a second instinct. When the beams were about to hit him, a jolt of thought would appear in his mind and urge him to move out of the way. But because he wasn't used to it, his body naturally rejected such instincts. Only once he got rid of his own thoughts did he finally connect with his diva. After that, the diva's instincts flowed through like water. All he had to do was follow it. And that wasn't all. He felt like he was one step closer to awakening his new ability. He just needed a little bit more and he would be able to unlock a completely new power. This was evident to not just him but also to Bo. She knew better than others about what happened. She was intimidated for the first time in her life. Even though Michael and his diva were undeveloped, he was still able to achieve this much in a short amount of time. She felt victory slipping away. Her mind immediately went into problem-solving mode, trying to think of a way to overcome this hurdle. Her problem was that she cannot defeat him under any circumstances. The more she fought him, the closer he would be to his breakthrough. And she had a feeling that this shouldn't happen under any circumstances. So her only choice was to subdue him. With her cleaver in hand, she rotated her entire arm into a giant circle, carving a giant sphere made out of nothing but air. And using Tenzing's ability on her right hand, she started to manipulate the gravity inside the large sphere. She commanded them to pull outwards, not inwards. The gravitational force of this new sphere was the complete opposite of a black hole. She created a white hole. It repelled everything around itself with the same force as a black hole. While Michael was reeling on the effects of a near breakthrough, she took this chance to throw the gigantic white hole in his direction. It collided with Michael, pushing him outwards and into the edges of his own cage. The switches automatically turned off, with the unity beams ceasing to exist to protect him from being burned by his own power. Chapter 575. Reaching for the rope. Michael crashed into the ground, with the white hole pinning him down into the bottom of the forest floor. The force of the crash was enough to create a crater from the point of contact, with the white hole continuing to send enormous force outwards. Rocks, soil, and trees were getting pushed away, with Michael pushing further and further into the crater. And if that wasn't enough, Bo's 8-star food monsters surrounded him, using their own powers to prevent Michael from escaping the white hole. With the unity cage turned off, Bo had free rein to finally escape. She quickly turned towards the center of the pocket dimension, with her eyes set on nothing but the glass dome. She looked back at Michael and pursed her lips. This was the only way that she could ensure her victory. Fighting him more would only make him stronger. Her only goal was to keep him contained. She couldn't even let him get hurt, or else she could push him further into the brink of a breakthrough. And so, with the white hole and the other 8-star monsters pinning him down, he wouldn't be able to catch up to her anytime soon. Finally, she jumped up to the top of the trees and began running straight to the dome to claim her prize. Everyone watching this from above couldn't help but start applauding Michael for his tremendous effort. It was a good attempt, but in the end, the difference in power between a 4th stage and a 6th stage was far too much. Wow. He almost won against her. If he had a little bit more time to develop, then he could have definitely beaten her today. It's all right. He's very young and has plenty of time to grow. I think it's safe to say that out of all the Rising 6, he has the most potential. In a year or two, we can definitely see him taking the top spot from Bo. But wait, look at him. He's moving. Just when they thought that Michael was going to surrender, they saw movement in the crater made by the giant white hole. They saw Michael's hand reach out and began clawing his way through the crater in an attempt to get out of it. Despite his efforts, the white hole's power was constantly pinning him down. Not only that, but the 6 8-star food monsters above the crater were making sure that his drone couldn't help him in any way. The bread elephant and the jello monkey pawed at the drone like curious animals, swatting it in the air as it struggled to just hover in the air. Then the jaguar leapt up and caught the drone in its jaws as it tried to gnaw through the metallic frame, but was unable to even get a scratch on it. Reptar Erlos and the other Rising 6 watching this couldn't help but feel bad for Michael. He was simultaneously incredibly lucky and unlucky at the same time. It was very fortunate for him that he was on the very brink of a breakthrough, but he was very unfortunate that it happened while he was fighting Bo. It's just unfortunate. Everyone knows that the closer someone is to a breakthrough, the more vulnerable they are. Erlos shook his head. Michael's mind is trying to concentrate on awakening his new abilities, so he can't even use his mystic arts to get himself out of this situation. Of course, if Michael was able to awaken his new ability while fighting Bo, then he would gain a temporary boost on his power. But of course, achieving that in the middle of a fight was near impossible to do so. And now, even if he awakened his new ability, it would be far too late. Bo was already on her way to the glass dome unimpeded. If Michael was somehow able to get out of the white hole's imprisonment, then he'd have the 8-star monsters to deal with as well. As good as he was, he wouldn't be able to defeat them in time to catch up to Bo. You should surrender now and find a place to meditate away from all the chaos, or else you'll miss the window for breakthrough, Reptar said, shouting towards the pocket dimension in the off chance that Michael could hear his advice. Even though he was under the intense repulsive force of the white hole, Michael felt nothing at all. He wasn't even paying attention to his own surroundings. He couldn't think. It felt like he was in an endless space with a weightless rope stretched out in front of him. As he tried to swim towards the rope, a slight force would push him away from it ever so slightly. Despite that, each time he swam towards the rope, he would be able to move closer and closer towards it by just a tiny fractions. It became a laborious task, one that needed his full concentration. He continued to swim for what seemed like an hour before he jumped for a final time and grabbed a hold of the rope. And with a tight grip, he pulled himself up and caused himself to be falling upwards and into a bright white light. Suddenly a series of thoughts entered his mind. It wasn't tangible. It wasn't made out of words. It was only an idea. And not just any idea, it was the framework and knowledge about his new ability. He immediately opened his eyes and found himself pinned down by the white hole above him. The series of thoughts reappeared in his head. His diva appeared hovering above his head. The two arms moved, reaching up towards the white hole as if it was holding it up for Michael. And suddenly the white hole's repulsive force stopped. For a second it moved up out of Michael's chest and gave him just enough space to move his hands. With this tiny space that was made for him, he reached down into his pockets and took out a small object made out of some kind of ivory. It was the ocarina. He squeezed the ocarina through the tiny space between him and the white hole and used all of his breath to play a guttural sound that sent an invisible shockwave throughout the pocket dimension. A few seconds later the ground rumbled. The 8-star food monsters above reared their heads up, their eyes showing worry and anxiousness. And in the distance soil, rocks and trees were erupting out into the air as a colossal worm swam through the crust of the earth. Anything in its direction was consumed inside its giant mouth filled with rotating sharp teeth. Bo's monster instincts kicked in and they immediately turned away to run. However, it was too late. The ground that they stood on crumbled like powder as the colossal worm swallowed everything in its path. The monsters fell into its stomach, with their fading figures being swallowed into the darkness. Once they were consumed, Bo's light mana was destroyed with them. The white hole pinning Michael down sputtered out its final repulsive force before wilting into pure energy that dissipated into the air. Chapter 576. Worm Call. Once the white hole was gone, Michael was free to finally move. But just ahead of him was the colossal worm with its mouth wide open and ready to consume him as well. He casted 2 air jets on the soles of his feet, launching himself high up into the air and completely dodging away from the colossal worm's avaricious mouth. Floating above the worm, he looked up and found the drone floating just in front of him. With his command, both of them readied up a shot of Unity gun. Light gathered at the tip of his finger and at the tip of the drone's barrel. While they were powering up, he quickly grabbed a switch from his pockets and threw it towards the drone. The switch perfectly attached itself onto the glowing tip of the drone's gun barrel. He did the same with his finger and attached a switch right where his beam was about to fire. The light peaked as the Unity gun shot a powerful beam towards the switch. At near instantaneous speeds, the Unity beam clashed with the iron switch blocking its path. His ability activated at the moment of impact, and instead of destroying the switch, the beams were instead frozen onto the switch's surface. The switches now had Unity beams frozen in its path, momentum, and time. He grabbed both of the powered switches in his hands and flicked it onto the on switch. Unity beams extended out of his hands, perfectly hitting the sides of the colossal worm. The monster cried a guttural roar, thrashing its head in pain. It quickly rammed its head towards the trees and boulders in its way, attempting to get rid of the painful Unity beams that were latched onto its skin. But of course the Unity beams were burned into the worm's skin itself, making it extremely hard to get off. It had become a permanent leash for the monster. With the Unity beams securely locked into the worm, he grabbed onto the switches tightly and pulled himself down towards the colossal worm's head, landing perfectly atop its sandy skin. The monster immediately noticed his presence and correctly deduced that he was the source of its pain. It flailed its body around to get him off, but his grip onto the switches were tight. His absolute Unity defense deflected off any trees, rocks, and debris that were shooting off towards him as the worm rode through the pocket dimension's surface. Unable to get him off, the colossal worm jumped up its head before diving down deeper into the earth. With Michael still holding on to the Unity beams leashed onto its sides, the worm plunged into the earth, letting the rumbling throughout the pocket dimension come to a stop. Everything was peaceful for a few seconds. And just then a huge explosion of soil and rock erupted from the earth as the colossal worm shot up to the surface. Its sandy and wrinkly skin was visible for the first time in its life. Michael was atop its head, who had pulled on the Unity reins and forced the monster to go back up to the surface. The colossal worm landed back into the ground with the pain of the leash controlling its every movement. As soon as Michael pulled the reins to the left, the worm had to move its head in the same direction. It became completely subservient to the Unity leash, allowing Michael to maneuver through the pocket dimension and directly towards the glass dome. Everyone watching this from above held their breaths in complete anticipation and shock. They had just witnessed something they had never seen before. The mighty colossal worm, the apex creature of the pocket dimension, was being controlled by a boy who was barely in 4th stage body formation. "He's riding the worm," they gasped. All of those people who said that Michael had to give up and surrender had to swallow back their words. Everyone thought that his journey in the auction was over. There was no chance for him to win. Nobody thought he'd be able to escape the white hole. Nobody thought that he'd be able to get rid of the 8-star food monsters lying in wait. And even if he hid, there would be no way to catch up to Bo before she could get inside the glass dome. But he proved that wrong. With the colossal worm at his beck and call, he was riding through the pocket dimension with no obstacles impeding his progress. All the other monsters in the pocket dimension were scared to their bones the moment they felt the rumbling of the ground caused by the worm. And those that were brave enough to face it were immediately swallowed into the worm's stomach. And that wasn't all. Look at his aura. He has broken through. He awakened a new ability. Erlos gasped, with the other rising 6 members becoming as shocked as him. They knew what this meant. Michaela was now running with a breakthrough high. His power was temporarily boosted because of his new discovery. His connection with his diva was the highest it had ever been, giving him access to its immense power. And before they could even process everything, the colossal worm finally arrived at the glass dome. Michael pulled on the reins, causing the worm to open up its mouth and swallow half of the dome's structure. The resulting destruction caused glasses to shatter, and the entire frame of the dome crumbled under its own weight. Now the structure inside was visible to all. Michael pulled the worm to a stop and looked down. He saw Bo looking back at him with surprise and shock written all over her face. She was just a few meters away from the pillars containing the vials of Sue. Just when she thought she was going to obtain the prize, Michael unexpectedly burst in through the dome, riding atop the most dangerous and destructive monsters inside the pocket dimension. To say that she was astounded would be an understatement. Michael turned off the switch, retrieving the unity beams from the worm's skin. Now that it was free, the monster roared into the air and immediately submersed itself into the ground, leaving behind a giant hole in its wake. Michael floated towards Bo with the two face to face once again. She looked at him, chuckling as she shook her head. "You don't give up, do you?" He shrugged. "Nope. Not when it's something I want." She bit her lips as she looked at him. She was simultaneously angry at him but also extremely impressed at the same time. She didn't know if she wanted to hug him or strangle him. After everything she threw at him, he still got back up. And now, just as she feared, he was even stronger than before. She could feel the power emanating from his body, a sign that he had broken through and obtained a temporary boost to his power. Without even speaking, she knew that this was their final battle. She raised both of her hands with the abilities of Fim and Tenzing emanating with power. "Even with your new power, the outcome won't change," she declared. Chapter 577. Bo's Final Attack. Michael looked at her, and in the background he saw the 5 stone pillars containing the drops of Sue. Each drop was contained inside its own vial, which was locked up atop the podium and protected by a magical cage that only a key could unlock. All 5 drops were still present, meaning that he arrived just in time. She hadn't gotten her hands on the drops as of yet. "Don't let your eyes wander just yet. You haven't defeated me," Bo reminded him. This time she was going all out. She had to, or else he would be able to overpower her with his boosted abilities. So if she couldn't defeat him now, she'll have to defeat him later. Her plan was to elongate the fight for as long as possible. She had to wait for the moment when his boosted power returned to normal, allowing her to once again gain the advantage of cultivation. She cleaved the air multiple times, creating black hole after black hole without stop. In just a short moment, she inundated the space with her abilities, giving Michael no chance to escape the light pillars. They were back into the same fight as before. Bo raised her arm with the power of Fim gathering at her palms. But this time Michael was prepared. "That won't work on me again," he said. He held the switch with both of his hands and entered a stance. His position made it seem like he was a knight ready to slash anything that came his way. And just then a click resounded through the air. With the switch turned on, and the unity beam shot out of Michael's hands, reaching a height to the top of his head before stopping. Half of his face was illuminated with the bright energy of the unity beam. No, it wasn't a beam anymore. It was a sword. Unity saber. He swung around the unity sword in his hands, mimicking the movements of swordsmen he saw in this life and his previous life. And suddenly he lunged forward with the unity saber slicing overhead and hitting the black hole right in front of him. The immense power held inside the unity saber burned through the very structure of the black hole. The gravitational field sputtered out before collapsing into itself and disappearing out of thin air. He moved to the side, swinging his unity saber horizontally, destroying 2 black holes in front of him in an instant. Bo could only watch with shock as she saw her black holes get annihilated with ease. Even though his moves were simple and had no complex stances, each swing of his destroyed more black holes in his surroundings. The situation was completely flipped on its head. This time she was the one who couldn't keep up. With each black hole she created, Michael would destroy 2 or 3 more with each swing. She quickly raised her left hand, pointing it to the last few clusters of black holes in her surroundings. The pillar of light burst out of her palms and headed straight to the edges of a black hole. Its intense gravitational field curved the light's trajectory and headed straight towards Michael's back. But just as it was about to hit, his diva suddenly extended its hand and tried to block the pillar of light from hitting him. Michael's eyes widened as he quickly turned around and slashed down with his Unity saber, splitting the solid pillar of light in half. What? She bit her lips, unable to accept that all of her attacks were rendered ineffective by Michael. He swung his Unity saber towards the last black hole in the area, completely ridding the place from intense gravitational fields. She slowly backed away, feeling her grasp of victory slowly slipping away. "It's not over yet," she exclaimed. She raised her cleaver in the air, with the female Frankenstein chef diva appearing above her head. The diva reached down towards her two arms and used its own knife to cut off the very light mana sitting on her wrists. Fim and Tenzing's light mana flowed out of her arms and floated in front of Bo. "Combine!" she shouted. Her diva used its flat cooking pan to smash the two clusters of light mana together, combining them into a single mote of light mana. She grabbed this combination of light mana and plunged it into her own heart. A new aura appeared around her, signifying a completely new power born from the combination of the two abilities. "This is my greatest attack. See if you can stand this," she screamed. She used her cleaver knife to create a giant sphere of air in front of her. And with a simple touch, she imbued the air with another intense gravitational field. But this time it's different. The power of the black hole manifested with a pure darkness inside the giant sphere. But then a completely white light appeared as she imbued it with the power of a white hole. The combination of both gravitational fields created a paradox. The black hole attracted everything inside, while the white hole repulsed everything outside. Its result was a purely destructive force that destroyed everything around it. This was a gray hole, one that Michael's Unity saber wouldn't be able to destroy. In response, Michael manifested his diva in the air. The two futuristic mechanical hands raised its hand and beckoned for something to get closer. Just then the ground underneath his feet started to shake. Dust, soil, and powdered glass shards started to levitate off the floor. "You know, I should thank you," he said to her. "Without you, I wouldn't have been able to figure out how to connect with my diva." At this moment, a huge chunk of earth erupted from the ground and levitated towards Michael. The soil crumbled as it floated, revealing a black, almost charcoal-like appearance of the material found underneath it all. This was graphite, a crystalline form of the carbon element. Michael's diva accepted the chunk of graphite in its hands. Suddenly, strange metallic limbs popped out of the diva's hands and began to form and sculpt the graphite into something with a more defined shape. Red lasers then beamed out of those little metallic limbs, welding the graphite into a form that was similar to the iron switch. Bo didn't realize that she stood there gawking at the scene and doing nothing else. This was the first time she saw something so strange. Usually divas' appearances and their powers reflected something that could be seen in nature. However, Michael's metallic arm diva was moving in ways that she never even thought possible. It was even glowing, as if lights replaced its very veins. She quickly moved into action, creating her final attack. The gray hole may be destructive, but it wasn't fast. She wouldn't be able to hit Michael with it. But that was where her combined ability came in. She used both of her hands and touched the gray hole with her palms. And suddenly a pure bright light emerged from her hands, pushing the gray hole towards Michael, accelerating it up to insane speeds. Chapter 578. Trust. Bo let out all of her energy onto her hands. The pillar of lights on her palms grew brighter and brighter, allowing it to push the gray hole with much more speed and power. The destructive paradox beamed forwards, destroying all the glass shards and metal debris around the fallen glass dome. Its speed continued to accelerate, and if left unstopped would gain as much speed as the pillars of light. With the gray hole just a few meters away from him, an intense destructive force assaulted everything around him. The ground underneath his feet crumbled away, leaving behind only the part where his feet were standing. Sparks flew off from his absolute unity defense as it fought against the immense riptide of gravity. Finally, the finished graphite block fell onto his hands. The shape was familiar to him. It was considered as an antique object in his previous world. The graphite block had a close resemblance to a cassette tape with two holes in the middle and a winding coil hidden inside the block. Above the block was a single button with a shape of two horizontal triangles facing away from each other. And just as the gray hole was about to clash with his prismatic shield, he pushed the button on the graphite block and tossed it towards the gray hole. As soon as the block made contact with the gray hole, an invisible shockwave reverberated through the paradoxical field. Suddenly it stopped its momentum and froze in place, just like when he used a switch. But a second later, the gray hole started to move backwards, with its trajectory returning from where it was before. And as it moved backwards, Michael saw powdered glass gathering back into a solid piece, returning to its original transparent shard. Even the ground that was turned into mere atoms were grouping back together, returning to their rightful place in the floor. All the destruction caused by the gray hole was reversed, as if it wasn't destroyed in the first place. Bo was beyond shocked as she saw the gray hole moving back towards her. She had no control over this. No matter how much she tried to push the gray hole back towards Michael, all of her efforts simply returned back to her, as if she was pushing against a wall. Eventually the gray hole returned to its original place, with the pillars of light returning back to her palms. and it wasn't long after that did the black hole and the white hole separate themselves into two before fizzling out of existence just as fast as they were created. This was Michael's new ability. He could reverse an object's momentum and time. Even the chaotic entropy of life would be forced to return to its original state as long as his new graphite reverse box was attached to it. Bo was stunned. Seeing the final attack, she poured all of her energy into being reversed as if nothing happened in the first place was enough to break her heart. Even though she was in the 6th stage, Michael was still able to overpower her abilities as a 4th stage. And before she could even recover, Michael appeared in front of her and attached another graphite reverse box into her chest. Immediately, the combined light mana of Fim and Tenzing's ability floated out of her chest. The combination separated into its own individual groups before returning to her two arms. But its reversal didn't end there. The light mana floated out of her body and into the skies, returning to their original owners Fim and Tenzing. Bo felt a weakness overcome her whole body. She fell on her knees. Without those abilities, she wouldn't be able to fight against Michael anymore. Not only that, but she could feel his drone behind her with its gun aimed and ready to shoot her at any moment. This was the final nail in the coffin. She looked at the ground, realizing that she lost. The whole auction was in a complete standstill. Their attention was wrapped on Michael and Bo's match, with most unable to even take a breath or else risk missing out on what happened. Even now, as Bo fell on her knees and Michael standing in front of her, many people still couldn't believe it. Michael won. With all odds against him, he was able to triumph against the strongest out of the Rising Six. Upon every turn, people thought he was going to lose. But somehow he would be able to pull something out of the air and completely turn the tides of victory. He actually won. He defeated Bo. No way. I can't believe this. I guess this settles it. He's the new strongest magnetic out of the Rising Six. After showing off what he could do during this game, everyone's perception of Michael completely changed. He went from an unknown kid who had a little bit of money to a mystic genius that could even defeat those who were 2 stages above him. Defeating Reptar and Erlos together got him a spot in the Rising Six. But defeating Bo was what made him jump up to the very top of the rankings. His strange powers, his mithril artifact flying weapon. Everything around him was newsworthy. After this auction, his name would be spread out through the entirety of Metropolis. They would hail him as the Rising Star. Now, of course, many people still considered the Rising Six companies as being better than the Reborn company. After all, their influence and their foundation in Metropolis ran very deep and had powerful crew members that weren't just their leader. The Pyramidic Cuisine, for example, had already proven this by being the first one out of all the companies to get all 5 keys from the game. They were strong enough to deter the other players from getting their keys, and they were also smart enough to find it in the first place. The majority of people thought that Michael was the one who was strong, not the Reborn company. And judging from the fact that he still hadn't had any of the keys up to this point proved them right. Still, this only further exacerbated how talented and powerful Michael was, that he was able to do all of this alone. In fact, all he had to do now was to eliminate Bo from the game and he would automatically win the bidding for the Sudrops. He didn't have to get the keys anymore. As Bo kneeled on the ground, she closed her eyes and waited for the inevitable unity beam that would shoot through his chest. But a few seconds later, there was nothing. She looked up at Michael, confused. "If you're waiting for me to surrender, then I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I will never do that," she said to him. Michael shrugged. "I don't want you to surrender. Then why don't you eliminate me already? Don't you want the Sudrops for yourself?" She asked, confused as to what he was waiting for. But a second later, she realized something. "Don't tell me. You're waiting for your teammates to get the keys?" He smiled. "Yup. You realize that all you have to do is to defeat me and you'll get the drops, right?" He looked towards the opaque partition in the distance. "I trust them. They'll come through. You'll see it." Chapter 579. New News. While all of that was happening, there was a certain spectator in the crowd who was penning ink to paper with furious intent. This was none other than Kronk, one of the main editors for the Daily Metro. He had come specifically to watch Michael and the Reborn company in this auction, thinking that he'd be able to see an interesting outcome. He expected Michael and the Reborn company to at least give a strong showing in the games, possibly even fighting against one of the Rising Six members. But Michael didn't do just that. He defeated the 2 of the Rising Six members at the same time. And now he has defeated the undisputed strongest member of the youngest generation, Bo Regard. Everything he had seen up to this point was enough to fill the pages of the Daily Metro newspaper 4 times and up. He kept writing all of his thoughts onto paper, so much so that their entire room was filled with inkblot papers from all around. His assistants couldn't even keep up, as they had to keep giving him more and more pieces of paper, as well as refilling his ink 3 times during this whole game. "Damn it, it's not good enough," he exclaimed, crumpling the piece of paper he'd been writing for over half an hour. For the first time in his life, he felt as if his journalistic skills weren't enough to do this story justice. He just couldn't find the right words to describe the electric feeling he was experiencing now, as he watched Michael perform upsets left and right. There just weren't enough words in their alphabet to explain the genius and wonder of the boy called Michael Vanderbilt. All of the crowd in the auction felt the same way as him. But he knew that they only knew half the truth. If they truly found out the history and the feats that the Reborn company was able to do during their short period of existence, then they would also feel the same way as him. However, this news would have to wait until after the auction. He had already decided that he was going to dedicate the front page only for Michael and the Reborn company. The rest of Metropolis should know that there was a new rising star in town. And just as he dipped the quill in his ink, he heard a knock on his door. "Don't interrupt me. I'm busy," he shouted. But a few seconds later the knocking continued. Finally his female secretary peeked through the door and informed him of a new development. "Sir, you're going to want to hear this," she said. She then opened the door fully, letting one of Daily Metro News correspondents enter Kronk's private suite. "Make your pitch quick." "I won't stop writing," he said, continuing to write a piece on Michael. The news correspondent cleared his throat before speaking. "Ahem. Sir, I have just been informed that a big discovery has been found. It's massive, they say." However, this news didn't seem to interest Kronk all that much. "There's plenty of discoveries that happen throughout the Queen's region. I'm not interested in making an article about some uncovered tomb. Sir, they say that someone has already found a perfectly preserved mithril artifact during the exploration. And some are saying that there could be many more that will appear." This time Kronk immediately stopped writing on his paper and looked back at his news correspondent. This man's entire job was to explore outside of Metropolis and bring back any piece of news that was worthy of an article. And he was the best of them. There was no way he was wrong on this account. A perfectly preserved mithril artifact? Kronk muttered, taking a break to think about the consequences of this discovery. Originally, a perfectly preserved mithril artifact was already incredibly hard to find. Even the global conglomerates and organizations only had less than 5 of them in their treasuries. So this news would definitely shake up the entire metropolis into action. But it was not to the point where it could disrupt the daily. However, witnessing what happened in this auction, after witnessing how Michael was able to dominate his peers with his strange flying mithril artifact, Kronk would guess that all the companies would be incredibly tempted to obtain their own perfectly preserved mithril artifacts. Everyone thought that mithril artifacts were just ancient swords and blades. But seeing Michael's weapon gave them the idea that maybe there were other mithril artifacts that were as powerful and as strange as the one he had. They weren't downplaying Michael's achievements, but the outcome of today's auction could have changed completely if he didn't have his mysterious flying mithril artifact. "Did you tell the others about this?" Kronk asked him. "I didn't. But I have a feeling that they already know. The news is being disseminated throughout the auction as we speak." It wasn't long before the news of this big discovery reached the ears of the major and minor factions. And just as Kronk predicted, they were hungrier and more desperate to get themselves their own piece of mithril artifact. The thought of having a flying weapon like Michael's made them all the more eager to get it. Many were already discussing what they're going to do after this auction. Some even suggested going out of the auction early to get a head start on the discovery, but the current rules of the auction prevented them from doing that. "Have you heard? There could be a real mithril artifact in the Red Ravine. I gotta go there. Who knows, maybe I'll be the lucky one to get it. Once this auction's over, I'm heading straight over there." While everyone was up in arms over this new big discovery down in the Red Ravine, there just seemed to be one private suite in the auction that wasn't up to date on the current news. Max Vanderbilt was starting to notice signs of movement around the auction. However, unlike them, the Reborn and the Vanderbilt family didn't have any connections to the news that these other companies received. The Vanderbilts lost their status and weren't even supposed to be in this auction, while the Reborn company had just recently established itself in Metropolis and didn't have a lot of connections yet. "Should we go and ask the Quench Company or the Duchess about what's happening?" Max asked, getting antsy. "Maybe they'll let us in on what's happening." Just then a shadow underneath his feet suddenly jumped out and landed directly on his head, surprising him. "We don't need to do that," Fudge said casually. "I already know what they're all fussing about. And it's just some big discovery in the Red Ravine. I already sent out my shadow clones to check it out and found nothing of value. It's just some mithril artifacts." Max was surprised, wanting to immediately prepare just like the other companies. But then he remembered. The Reborn didn't even have to go to this big discovery. It would be useless. They could just create more mithril artifacts right in the comfort of their own nation. Chapter 580, Bickering. But it was at that moment that some people realized that the game still wasn't over. All the players, including Michael, still weren't being teleported out of the pocket dimension. Finally, they looked towards Michael and saw that Bo still wasn't eliminated from the game. She was still kneeling on the ground with Michael standing just a few feet away from the 5 pillars of Su. What is he doing? Why hasn't he eliminated her already? Wait. Is he waiting for his teammates to get the keys for him? He should have already won. He doesn't need the keys. The fact that Michael was just standing next to the pillars without doing anything proved their guesses. Many people couldn't understand why he would do this. Was he expecting his teammates to defeat Bo's elite crew members? Many were doubting if that was even possible. After all, the pyramidic cuisine was famous for having no weaknesses in their foundation. Bo, their leader, was strong. The magnetics below her were strong. And even the normal fighters at the very bottom of their chain of command were capable fighters of their own. It would be an unnecessary risk for Michael to count on his teammates to perform the same upset as him. Many people even noticed that the cultivation of Michael's demi-human crew members were on average one stage lower in cultivation. Not to mention Bo's teammates were all equipped with even the best armors and mithril relics. In the region filled with nothing but dunes of hot sand, one red-scaled dragonborn was walking with a bored look on his face. Zion stepped to the top of the mound of sand and looked around himself, squinting his eyes. But everywhere he looked he couldn't see a single sign of life anywhere around the desert region. "Am I alone?" he complained. Although his sister Shiina told him that he should only focus on finding a key in the sands of the desert, he thought that that would be too boring and decided to explore the entirety of the desert to look for other players. His plan was to eliminate every single person he saw and hopefully find a key dangling on their waists. But no matter how much he spent trudging through the hot sand, he couldn't find anyone around him. He even reached the edges of the desert region itself, seeing the snowy mountain region right next to him. He was starting to think he was the only person around. And it was at that moment that he heard an unusual sound coming from behind him. A sharp knife was tumbling towards his head at extremely fast speeds. He inwardly scoffed and ducked to the side before turning around. At the top of the dune, he saw a man wearing a chef's apron. Zion couldn't help but break out into a smile, as he finally saw an opponent for the first time in a while. And he quickly noticed a dangling golden key tied around his chef's apron. "A target has come to him. You're the only one left," the chef guy said to him. "Ah, that must be why I can't find anyone," Zion realized. "But it's good that you came to me, or else I would have spent so much more time trying to find you." The chef guy looked at Zion with confusion and disbelief written on his face. He had scoured the entire desert and found no one else but him, meaning that the other players were probably eliminated due to their leaders getting defeated on the other side of the pocket dimension. "You're not from the Crocodile Leather Company. You're not from Spice Vice. You're from that Reborn company," the chef realized. "Yup, and the handsomest too." The chef was perplexed. It's only Bo against that Michael kid? He already had the key, and there was no doubt that his other teammates also had their keys. Bo should have ended the game by now and obtained all drops. This could only mean that they were currently embroiled in an intense duel that prevented Bo from using her keys. Of course, he had no doubt that Bo would eventually win. However, there was a bad feeling in the air. He couldn't help but think that something happened to Bo. "I'll have to defeat you to ensure our Lady Bo's victory," he exclaimed. He extended his hand and telepathically reached towards the knife he threw in Zion's direction. It returned to his hand, showing off its glow as a mithril relic. "Haha, you don't know how long I've been waiting for this," Zion said, cracking his knuckles together. Zion squatted down and reached for his shadow, about to take out his gauntlets as well. But all of a sudden he heard a yell coming from behind him. "Zion!" Confused Zion looked behind him and squinted his eyes. He realized that the sound wasn't coming from anywhere in the desert, but it was coming from the snowy mountains right behind him instead. On top of a ledge filled with icicles, there was a person who blended perfectly well with the snowy background. Zion wouldn't have even seen her if it weren't for the red glare coming from her eyes. It was none other than his sister Shiina. "Sis, what are you doing here?" he asked, a bit embarrassed. Shiina put her hands on her waist and glared at Zion. "I'm here to make sure that you're not slacking around. Have you been looking for those keys like I told you?" Zion's cheeks turned even more red than his scales. He was extremely embarrassed being scolded like this in front of other people. "Sis, I'm busy here," he said, not so subtly, using his eyes to point at his chef opponent. "Don't change the subject, young man. I know you've been slacking off. I saw you wandering around the desert, not even trying to find the keys. What if it was right underneath your feet, but you just won't look for them?" Zion quickly stomped his feet, having had enough of the lecture. "Can't you see I'm trying to, sis? Look, he has a key and I'll get it once I defeat him." Shiina shook her head. "You wouldn't have to if you had just searched for the key like I told you to." At this point, the chef guy was just awkwardly standing there watching all of this unfold with confusion plastered across his face. He didn't know what was happening. Sorry about this, Sir Chef. I'll beat you in just a little bit. Let me just talk to my sis," said Zion, rubbing his hands together to apologize to him. "Zion, don't make me come down there," Shiina warned. This pissed Zion off, so he stuck out his tongue to tease her. Meh, you can't come down here. There's a barrier that's separating the regions." Shina's eyes glowed even redder, with her hands gesturing to get the arrow from his quiver. "Get the key. That's what I'm trying to do, but you keep interrupting me," Zion lashed out. Even though the chef didn't know what they were talking about, he immediately picked up on the fact that seemed to think that they could get his key easily. Chapter 581. Fun ruined. The chef couldn't understand why they were so lax. They were casually talking to each other about beating him up and getting his key as if it was the easiest thing in the world. They weren't even subtle. He was right there listening to them. He had never met such a strange group of demi-humans. It was much more obvious now that they were not local to Metropolis. Otherwise they would have known that he was among the top non-magnetic fighters of the pyramidic cuisine. And judging from the power emanating from the red-scaled dragonborn, he estimated that the boy was only in the 4-star realm while he was in the 5-star realm. Not only that, but he had the power of a mithril relic by his side. Once he had proven his worth in this auction, then there was a good chance that he would be promoted to a major officer. He could have a chance to become a magnetic. So all in all, he found no basis for Zion to be as confident as he was in this fight. He wouldn't be talking so casually to his teammate if he knew the strength that he was facing. From what he could see, the only way that he could lose was if it was a 2 versus 1. There is no way for you to team up against me, he said to the Dragonborns. The barrier separating the desert region to the snowy region cannot be crossed by any entity, magic, or power. He thought that that was the reason why the white-scaled Dragonborn was here. She was here to help Zion. Really, that's good. Zion breathed a sigh of relief. I don't want my sis to ruin my fun. Even now Zion still wasn't exhibiting the same nervousness his other opponents exhibited when they faced him. I hate to break it to you, but this will not be fun. The chef threw the mithril relic dagger towards Zion, which he ducked away from quite easily. Zion then raised his hands in front of him and tucked his chin near his fists using the peekaboo style of boxing. He rushed towards the chef with his feet constantly shuffling and leaving behind only a single point of contact on the sand below him. The chef retrieved his dagger, telepathically commanding it to pierce towards Zion's back. But Zion seemed to have anticipated it and stopped in his tracks and sidestepped to dodge it. Impressive, the chef praised. Zion finally came face to face with the chef, throwing a simple left jab to his face. But the chef saw his attack clearly, using his dagger to come in front of him and clash with Zion's fist. The Dragonborn continued to throw jab straights and uppercuts towards the chef, but each time his attack was fended off by the mithril relic dagger that seemed to dance with absolute fluidity. From anyone's perspective, it looked like their battle was equal. Zion's punches were a bit slow and ineffective in the chef's eyes, while the chef's dagger was easily dodged with Zion's strange shoulder movements. They don't call me the fillet master for nothing, the chef shouted, casting a magic spell that created 10 identical copies of his own mithril relic dagger. The daggers floated around him in a line, forcing Zion to take a step back. Diced severance, the chef shouted, with the 10 daggers shooting off towards Zion. The daggers came at him from all sides, with each one trying to skewer him with the right precision and timing. Zion kept dodging out of the way, taking a step back each time he did so. It seemed that the difference between a 5-star fighter and a 4-star fighter was evident during this fight. But although it seemed like he was pushed on the ropes, none of the daggers actually hit Zion. His foot technique and his dodges kept him out of harm's way, albeit with the smallest of margins. The chef thought he'd win, but just then they heard another yell coming from the Snow Mountain region. Zion, don't waste any more time, Shiina shouted. Zion, hearing this, couldn't help but click his tongue out of frustration. Damn it. I wanted to have some longer fun, he complained under his breath. Despite that, he took out a chocolate pellet from his pockets and swallowed it whole. Suddenly a powerful aura emanated from Zion's body, causing the sand beneath his feet to blow away from him. Even the daggers surrounding him were temporarily knocked out of their formation, surprising the chef. What? He looked at Zion and felt a completely new power surging out of his body. That's not possible. It seemed as if Zion had broken through to the 5-star realm in an instant. Finally, with his new power, Zion punched one of the daggers and upon contact turned it back into pure mana. As the daggers tried to pierce him again, Zion kept dodging and issuing a counterattack that destroyed all the dagger magic copies with one punch. He's really a 5-star fighter, the chef exclaimed. It wasn't long before Zion performed an uppercut and punched the last dagger floating in front of him. This was the real mithril relic dagger, and it flew back towards the chef, uncontrollably flipping in all sorts of awkward directions and forcing the chef to dodge his own weapon. You were hiding your power? The chef asked. I didn't want the fight to be over too fast, Zion said, punching the air. Now come on, let's fight some more. However, before the chef could even comprehend what happened, they heard another scream come out from the white-scaled lady on top of a snowy cliff. I'm gonna count to 3, Zion. 1, 2. Immediately Zion raised his hand in surrender. All right. Geez, even if she couldn't get to him now, he'll definitely pay for it later when they get out of the pocket dimension. He reluctantly and sluggishly bent down and reached into his own shadows, rummaging around with it for a few seconds before he finally found what he was looking for. As he pulled out this thing, the chef saw a bright violet light coming out of the shadow portal. Zion took out the black and violet gauntlets and equipped them in his hands. The weapons locked into place in his wrists before glowing with a violet power. That's a And before the chef could even express his shock and surprise at the weapon in Zion's hands, he suddenly saw the very fabric of space start to tear in front of him. "Sorry, Sir Chef. My nagging sister wants me to get this over with. Maybe once you get stronger next time we can play a lot longer." Zion said those words with the innocence of a child, all the while having literal space start to crack from the mere presence of his gauntlets. The chef was unable to move. He was completely stunned. He couldn't help but stare at Zion as he jumped into the air and punched downwards. The sound of glass cracking echoed out into the desert region. That was the only thing that the chef remembered before being knocked unconscious. Chapter 582. He's lucky too. Zion landed back down and saw the poor chef laying quietly on the sand as if he was just sleeping. He quickly did a little sign of apology before taking off the keys tied to the man's apron. "See, sis? Why did you have to go and ruin my fun?" Zion said, dangling the keys in front of him towards Shiina. As soon as he had it in his hands, a bright pillar shot out from underneath his feet and reached all the way into the skies. With the keys in his possession, a copy of the key would immediately be put in Michael's possession. "You could have had it so much earlier if you had just searched for it like I told you," Shiina insisted. Zion had to exhale out loudly. There was nothing pleasing his sister. No matter what he tried to do, she would always find something to complain about. Lord Michael could have been waiting for that, you know. "You shouldn't seek out your own thrill at this auction." The selfish grumbled Shiina. At this point Zion had enough. "What about you? You're the one who's making him wait. Instead of spending all this time lecturing me about what I should do, you should have been searching for the key as well." Despite his good argument, Shiina didn't see anything wrong with what she did. "I had to make sure you were doing your job correctly. And it's good that I did. If I hadn't been here you would play around too much, completely forgetting about the key." Zion was completely shocked at his sister's unabashed hypocrisy. She was just doing that same thing he was. "What about the key?" he asked her. Shiina then reached down into her shadow, taking out a white and gold compound bow out of her inventory. The weapon glowed with a yellow glint, showing off its power as a genuine mithril artifact. She took out a simple arrow from her quiver and loaded it onto the notch of her bow. She then stretched the bow's strings up to her shoulders, powering up her shot for a second, and finally released the arrow into the air. The harsh cold winds of the snow-tipped mountains bombarded the arrow with furious winds that would have knocked any normal arrow off its course. But strangely her arrow stayed its course even as snow and hail tried to veer it off its original trajectory. Reaching the peak of its height, the arrow curved downwards and before landing into the snowy glacier below. Shiina seemed to have been aiming for nothing, seeing as the arrow hit nothing but thick fluffy snow. But a few seconds later a groan echoed out of the mountain as a hand burst out of the thick snow. A man slowly got up from his prone position, revealing that the arrow pierced directly into his back. After finding the key through 6 feet deep snow, the man decided to just camouflage himself and hide throughout the rest of the game. He thought that would be the safest way to ensure victory. He let go of all of his armor and weapons to make sure that he wouldn't stand out in the cold. He'd be defenseless, but no one would find him. Or so he thought. He struggled to keep himself up using his arms, but his strength eventually gave up. He plopped back down into the snow, knocked unconscious. Back on the very opposite end of the region, Shiina squinted her eyes and nodded to herself. She put her mithril artifact bow back to her shadow and swiped her hands, satisfied with a job well done. Then a bright golden light shone down on her coming from the skies above. A golden key suddenly floated down towards her before resting on her palms. Now that the last player in the Snowy Mountains region was eliminated, the key would automatically be given to the last surviving player. Shiina looked back at Zion and flashed the golden key at him with a triumphant smile on her face. "You were saying?" Meanwhile, the entirety of the auction was still occupied with the news of the big discovery in the Red Ravine. And since the game was basically over, not a lot of people were even paying attention to the pocket dimension. However, some of them were watching, and what they saw completely blew their mind. "Did you guys just see that? Huh? What happened? Did Michael finally eliminate Bo? No. Look at the other side of the pocket dimension. Look at the desert and tundra regions." After such frantic shoutings, a lot of people put their focus back on the pocket dimension. There they saw the red-scaled and white-scaled dragonborns holding a golden key in their hands while arguing against each other. "When did they get a key? I don't see anybody around their region. Wait, is everyone eliminated but them? They did. They just beat them. In less than a minute." One of the men who watched the entire thing unfold began to tell everyone about what he saw. Of course, seeing it and hearing about it were two completely different experiences. Many couldn't believe that the elite chef fighters from the pyramidic cuisine would be beaten in a straight fight. What about the fillet master? How did he get eliminated? He got punched with a really strong mithril relic. What? Nobody even thought that the Reborn company had any other mithril relics other than Michael's flying weapon. But now there were reports being told that 2 of his crew members had mithril relics of their own. And judging from the feats they just pulled, it seemed that those weapons were extremely powerful. Because of this, Alaric and the other major factions who were busy planning for the Red Ravine discovery couldn't help but put their focus back onto the pocket dimension. Are you sure you saw it? Maybe you were just seeing things. I saw it, Alaric. Those weren't just mithril relics. They were mithril artifacts. The real deal. Everyone was already amazed that Michael was able to find a mithril artifact of that caliber. But as it turned out, he wasn't the only one who had one among his crew members. The major factions were incredibly shocked to see that the Reborn company had 3 mithril artifacts. Many people were now wondering where they could discover such great treasures. Michael was talented, he was strong, he was rich, and now he was also incredibly lucky. Many people were starting to think that it was unfair. The thought that Michael could have forged all of this by himself did not cross their minds even once. That would be too absurd. If the global conglomerates couldn't even recreate mithril artifacts using their immense resources, then practically nobody could. Even the Duchess was under the impression that Michael just happened upon them buried in an ancient site. It makes sense. Not a lot of people visit the King's region. And I hear that he inherited some kind of territory there. The parched lands, I think. He must have had tremendously good luck and found numerous discoveries there. Chapter 583, Eruption. On the region of the pocket dimension where magma rose up from the surface and created cracks on the ground, where hot geysers shot out from the floor and reached heights up to 100 feet in the air, and where a very active volcano sat in the middle, there was one dragonborn who meekly walked through its surface. With the orange and reddish hue of the environment brought on by heat, her green scales stood out among everything like a last bastion of nature. She was a Misu, and with her spear in her hands, she trudged through dangerous terrain, looking for a specific golden key on the ground. She had been spending her time quietly looking for it, making sure to avoid any other player in the region. While they fought tooth and nail to eliminate each other, she stayed in the background, meekly looking through the magma cracks. But now she was all alone. The other players were eliminated, and it looked like she and one other person was left all alone in this volcanic landscape. You can do this, for boss. She muttered to herself, hyping her up. In the distance, she saw a person sitting atop the mouth of the volcano's crater. She was just sitting there doing nothing and just watching as the lava bubbled from under the surface. Amisu saw the golden key dangling from her waist. You have to defeat her, she told herself. Stealing her heart, she walked up the volcano and approached the woman behind her. Gi? Give me the key. Amisu demanded, her words stumbling. Even though she shot out her lungs, it seemed that the woman didn't even hear her one single bit. I don't want to fight you, she reiterated with her spear at the ready and slowly approaching the woman. It was only when she was just a few meters away from the volcano's crater did the woman finally turn around and acknowledged her presence. Oh, sorry. I didn't see you there, the woman said with a friendly voice. There was no hostility coming from her words or her actions at all, as if she had just come to the volcano to stroll peacefully. Amisu cleared her throat. Fight me. I want your golden key. She held her mithril artifact spear with her hands shaking. Seeing this, the woman shook her head. Hey girl. There's no need for us to fight, okay? Let's just stay here and enjoy the view. Look at that volcano. The short-haired woman wearing a chef's hat continued to look at the magma coming out of the surface, never even bothering to look at Amisu at all. I'm serious. I need that key, and I won't hesitate to use force if I have to. However, Amisu's threat didn't seem all that threatening given her stutters and her shaky voice. It looked like she was just putting on a brave face. The short-haired woman shrugged. Why waste your energy? Just relax like me. Seeing the woman constantly disregard her threats, Amisu felt even more invisible than before. She was shy and never really talked all that much, meaning that people didn't pay attention to her. And that was fine with her. For a second, she considered just doing as the woman said. Maybe there was no need to fight. She could just look for the keys around the region. But then the woman said this. Not to brag or anything, but I'm undefeated when it comes to things like this. You'll just waste your energy fighting me, as the outcome will be the same. It also goes without saying that Lady Bo will win too. It's impressive that your Reborn company was able to last this far, but she'll triumph over that Michael kid anytime now. No offense to that kid, but he's out of his depth against her. The woman wasn't basing this out of nothing. She knew Bo was stronger. As for her beating Amisu single-handedly, she could see that Amisu was still inexperienced with a lot of weaknesses around in her stance. Not only that, but the demi-human was only in the 4th stage while she was in the 6th stage. The difference was just too much, and she'll only end up breaking a few bones in a useless fight. The fact that Amisu was staying silent proved her point. See? Now isn't that piece nice? It was just then that the ground started rumbling. The short-haired woman immediately got up off her seat and cheered. It's erupting. The volcano is erupting. This is what I've been waiting for all this time. She curiously peeked over the crater, trying to see the lava bursting out of the crater. But as she looked down, she saw no sign of increased volcanic activity. Magma was still coming out of the crater, but it was only a small leak. Huh? Am I just hearing things? She turned around and was just about to return to her seat when she looked up at Amisu. The green-scaled dragonborn's entire body was shaking violently, causing the ground underneath her feet to start rumbling as well. Not only that, but the spear in her hands started to glow with the power of a genuine mithril artifact, intimidating the sword mithril relic in the woman's hands. What? Amisu kept her head down, grabbing her spear with an intense grip. Michael, boss. You shouldn't have said that. Furious winds started to gather around Amisu, with the fire and magma from the ground starting to float towards her. The wind kept growing. The short-haired woman could barely cling on to the ground. She was starting to get pulled into the wind. What the hell? She muttered out as her entire body started to get carried towards Amisu. The only thing keeping her from falling into the tornado was her grip onto the crater itself. Just then Amisu raised her spear and pointed it at the woman. Boss is the strongest. Remember that. Amisu lunged the spear towards her with the power of the fire tornado gathering at the tip. The winds were so powerful that the woman genuinely worried for her own life. Fear took hold of her heart and knocked her unconscious. The pocket dimension immediately teleported the woman out of this perilous situation just before the spear hit her body. With no target left to hit, the spear released all of its energy into the volcano below, causing it to explode, a violent burst of magma all around the skies. The entire region was ravaged not by the eruption but from the single spear tip that was powered through sheer emotion. With magma and molten rocks falling around her, Amisu stood still. Just then a golden light shined down on her with a key floating perfectly into her palms. She took this key and put it on her pockets before immediately putting her hands on her head in shame. Oh no! What did I do? I destroyed the pocket dimension. She was so embarrassed that she wanted to put her head into the floor. Meanwhile, on the other side of the region where keys were hidden inside a giant maze, Jaku looked out into the skies and saw magma falling from the heavens. Sigh. Now who angered my sis? They should have known better. TSK. Chapter 584. Lazy Living. All around Jaku were tall walls made out of some kind of magic barrier that looked made out of stone. This was the maze region of the pocket dimension where keys were hidden all around it. Now the maze had an open top, but that didn't mean that people could peek above it. It was made out of the same barrier that separated the key and the lock section of the pocket dimension. Why did I have to pick the short straw? Jaku lamented. When the game started, they just randomly assigned regions to each player through a simple straw. Unfortunately, Jaku picked the most boring one out of all of them. Because of the winding maze, it was very possible that players wouldn't even be able to see each other, let alone fight each other. This led players to just go through the maze and hope that they would stumble upon a key. This would have been perfect for Amisu but a nightmare for Jaku. Hey, I'm tired. I want to sleep. Even though they promised to look for the keys, Jaku thought that that was too exhausting. So he laid down the entirety of the game and simply waited until other players found him, and hopefully brought a golden key right into his lap. Just then a man peeked out of the corner and saw Jaku sleeping on the floor. Finally Jaku awoke, yawning and stretching out his body. Took you long enough. The man eyed Jaku. You've just been lying here doing nothing? Yep, Jaku nodded, swinging his hip side to side. Now where's the golden key? I'm gonna need it. It was then that Jaku noticed that there wasn't any golden key dangling from his waist at all. Where is it? The man chuckled. If you want to have it, then you'll have to kill me. Jaku narrowed his eyes at the man and eventually put on a disgusted face. Yuck! Did you swallow the key? Ha ha ha! That's right. I knew that it was very likely that other players would just wait until I found a key and just stole it right from my hands. The man then spread his hands. But this is lucky for you since I have found the other keys. I can help you find it, but there's just something you gotta do first. No thanks, Jaku said, going back to sleep. Hey, what? Don't you want the key for your team? Jaku waved his hands. Yeah, but I don't want to do your weird request. You think of me as some pervert. I'm not. Sure. Just listen. I have hidden the other keys in the maze, and you can only find them after solving the puzzles I have prepared for you. And it was at that moment that they both felt a large explosion from a distance. They looked up only to see magma and molten rocks flying from a distance and coming towards them before hitting the invisible barrier separating the different regions. Sigh. Now who angered my sis? Said Jaku, shaking his head. They should have known better. TSK. Now I gotta go and do my job. Jaku groggily got up off the ground and walked over to the guy. Now you wanna play? Jaku held out his hand and the guy took this as a sign of participation. Good. Now the first riddle is... But then Jaku's hands continued past the man's hands before eventually reaching his stomach. Electricity crackled around Jaku's dark blue scales, empowering his hand with lightning-fast speed. Jaku's hands started to vibrate at a very fast speed, eventually making his hands blurry. And before the man could even react, Jaku pierced his hands towards his stomach. However, the expected blood and gore that would come after this terrifying experience didn't come. Instead, Jaka's hands perfectly passed through the man's torso, without hurting even a single cell in his body. He successfully phased through his skin. Jaka fiddled around for a bit before finding the exact key he wanted. And with swift movement, his pulled hand out holding a slimy golden key in his hands. Disgusting, Jaku said, barely holding the key with his 2 fingers. It was still dripping with stomach acid, with some other particles of undigested fish meat stuck to its side. What did you do? The man shouted, immediately lunging towards the key. But before he could get his hands on it, Jaku turned into blue electricity and disappeared from the man's sight. He immediately wanted to run towards Jaku, but suddenly he felt his clothes start to become loose around his body. And just as he ran, he felt his shorts fall down to his ankle, revealing his privates to the entire auction. All of his clothes had turned into mere fibers, as if they had been cut up thousands of times in a single second. Even his underwear wasn't spared. The man fell to his knees, holding his privates with only his hands. And in the distance he could hear the sound of Jaku's voice. Pervert! The man held his head down, almost sobbing. I just wanted someone to solve my puzzles. With 4 keys in total, there was just one left before Michael completed the drops. Grieve was the one in charge of finding the key in the green forestry region of the pocket dimension. The undead skeleton general strolled under the shades of the vibrant forest, looking around and seeing as the birds tweeted their songs and squirrels ran up on the trees. He continued walking until he found a small shed made out of large banana leaves and dried wood. It looked like he had been living in this makeshift tent for years. Ho ho ho. This is quite a nice life, he said, sitting down on the campfire and chomping on a piece of apple which just fell out of his ribs and rolled down the ground, which was being eaten by birds and insects. He had spent a good hour just sitting perfectly still in his tent, watching as the forest life around him went by. Just then he quickly stood up. Ah, right. I need some truffles. Grieve had been sustaining himself by picking out mushrooms in the forest and making himself mushroom soup. He walked through the forest and eventually found some good truffles on the ground. He bent down and started picking out pieces of it to take it back to his tent. And just as he pulled out the last truffle, a shiny piece of metal suddenly burst out of the ground and rolled around the forest floor. Grieve followed the metal as it landed right beside a tree. He picked it up and saw that it was a golden key. Wow. I wonder who left this here? They must have not been able to get out of their house, ho ho ho. Grieve pocketed the golden key and went back to his tent. But then he stopped, remembering something. Ah, silly me. I forgot to pick up the truffles I harvested, ho ho ho. He went back to the site as if nothing significant happened. Grieve had completely forgotten what he came here for in the first place. Chapter 585. Game 1. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the winner of tonight's auction for 5 sous drops in total. Michael and the Reborn Company. Soon after Barnaby's introduction, Michael and the Rebornians were transported out of the pocket dimension and into the stage. Immediately the entire auction crowd got up out of their seats and cheered for his presence. Nobody expected this outcome. Some expected Bo to get at least 2, with the other 3 distributed amongst the other rising 6. But in the end Michael got all 5 of them. Michael had shown himself to be a dominant force, one that could stand toe-to-toe with the rising 6 and even rise above all of them. But the truly surprising part was his crew, the so-called Rebornians. These demi-humans that nobody had ever seen before displayed a strength that showed how their company was ahead above others. They defeated the elite fighters of the pyramidic cuisine so fast that people couldn't even keep up with them anymore. It was as if they were playing the game on easy mode. It was at this point that people realized that it wasn't just Michael who deserved to be in the major factions. It was also his entire company. Many people discounted Reborn, thinking that he was the only one strong enough to keep it together. But in the end, the Rebornians proved them completely wrong. Now the verdict was clear. The Reborn Company jumped up to the top spot of the rising 6, beating out even Bo and the pyramidic cuisine in terms of strength. So once people got a good look at Michael when he was back on stage, they couldn't help but stare and applaud him for his domineering show of force. I can't believe he's so young. What species are these Rebornians? They look like lizards or something. I wonder where they got their mithril relics. I feel like their weapons are incredibly strong, much stronger than normal mithril relics. Meanwhile, in one of the VIP suites above there was a gathering of mermen who looked down at the Dragonborns with curious looks on their faces. Am I the only one, or do they kind of look like? No, it can't be. If so, then why are they here? There's no way that they'd be masquerading here as some kind of normal demi-human. They do bear a resemblance to those draconic species, but there are some differences that differentiate the two completely. They're using human weapons. They all looked towards their leader, who was a woman whose face was obscured by a shadow. But what was prominent even in the darkness was her bright red hair that flowed down her chest. It's not them, she said. They're different. They're more. She stopped herself from talking. She had a hunch, but she wasn't sure. Even though these dragon-like demi-humans were weak compared to others, she could see a depth inside their bodies that even she couldn't calculate. It was as if their potential was endless, which seemed impossible to even suggest. "Mrs. Should we talk to them?" her bodyguards asked her. "No, they're not worth the time yet," she replied. Then she looked down towards the golden-haired boy receiving cheers and applause from all sides. "But I am curious as to how a boy like him was able to get all of those mithril artifacts for himself." Michael and the Rebornians went back up to their VIP suite to the top of the auction. There Michael was welcomed by his mother, who quickly took him for a deep embrace. "Oh, my sweet baby boy," she cried out. "Mom, we won," he reminded her. She wiped a tear from her eyes. "I know, but that just means that after today there will be so many women that will be vying for your attention." He rolled his eyes at her and looked back at the Dragonborns. "By the way, what took you guys so long?" he asked, narrowing his eyes at each of them. "Let me guess. You got lazy, you got shy, you forgot, and both of you argued again." They quickly denied the accusations and now made it seem as if he didn't trust them. "Boss, come on, you know me. I'm the fastest one who got a key." Jaku lied. "She's the one who did it. She distracted me," Zion said, pointing at Shiina. "Lord Michael, I was simply making sure he doesn't screw up." "I wouldn't." Amisu shyly said some excuse which Michael didn't seem to catch. As for Grieve, he was unapologetically just being himself. "Ho ho ho. I forgot." Michael sighed and chuckled to himself. They might seem like they're goofing off, but he knew they'd pull it off when it mattered the most. And in the end they did. Though he was pretty sure that he would have lost a drop if Grieve hadn't gotten lucky and found a key accidentally. Oh well. Just then he heard a knock on the door. "Michael, can I come in?" The familiar voice of a lively old woman echoed out. Of course, it was none other than the reigning monarch of Metropolis, Duchess Regina. She came into his VIP suite, which made the other Vanderbilts immediately kowtow on the floor with respect. "Duchess, oh please, no need for formalities. I'm a friend of Michael's," she said with a smile. "Why do I have a feeling she wants something?" "Duchess, why the sudden visit?" She put on an innocent look as if she was offended that he thought she'd need something from him for her to visit. "Can't I visit an old friend?" Michael of course didn't believe her. "Ahem. Alright, I do have something in mind. But it's not my fault. You were hiding your Rebornian crew all this time. You never told me all of you had mithril artifacts." He shrugged. "It's just some weapons." She quickly stomped her feet towards him. "It's not just some weapons, Michael. Don't you know that because of you people are now extremely desperate to have a mithril artifact of their own? Alaric, Aerith, Bobby, and everyone else in the major factions are up in arms about mithril artifacts. Everyone saw how powerful they are and how they could change the entire tides of a battle. And somehow you have 4 of them." He quickly raised his hand and corrected her. We have more than that actually. But whatever." But the Duchess didn't seem to hear what he said and kept on complaining to him. "And now, because of this new discovery in the Red Ravine, people are thinking that they're going to find a mithril artifact for themselves. You should just tell them that you found your mithril artifact in your territory in the King's region." "But I didn't," he said to her. "Oh, then where did you get those?" "It must have been a giant undiscovered tomb left behind by an army from the ancient era." "No tombs. I just made them." The Duchess shook her head as if trying to remove the unbelievable words she just heard. "Say what now? I forgot I haven't told you. I visited the Dwarven Kingdom and found a way to manufacture them myself." Chapter 586. Prize Delivery. The Duchess reared her head back as if there was a massive pain in her neck. Her doctors immediately rushed towards their VIP suite and gently massaged the back of her head. The information Michael unloaded was so shocking that it almost brought upon a disaster for the monarchs of Metropolis. Everyone was willing to go through the dangerous Red Ravine expedition just for a chance to get a mithril artifact. They were willing to spend all of their money, power, and time to be the first one to uncover a treasure left behind by the ancient past. The Duchess came here to inform Michael of this in the first place. She wanted him to prepare for the Red Ravine. But crazily enough, he didn't need to. Somehow he could create mithril artifacts. Those words sounded like fiction to the Duchess. It was akin to a person saying that they could build a mountain out of a molehill. It was equivalent to a person saying that they could build the moon. It was a godly task being done by a human. The powers of the ancient era were so mysterious and all-powerful that the people of this world could only equate it to nature and the universe itself. No one could build nature, but somehow Michael did. "You can build mithril artifacts?" the Duchess muttered out, massaging her temples. "Yup, that's how I built my drone," he said, with the drone buzzing out of his pockets and hovering in front of her. I see. "That still doesn't make sense at all," she replied. "We have to talk about this some other time. I have to recover." The Duchess shook her head and walked out of Michael's room, still in a daze. Just finding out that Michael was friends with the Dwarven Kingdom was enough for her to be more than surprised. But to find out that he could make mithril artifacts, That was a whole other thing entirely. This was something the entirety of humanity wanted to solve, with some already thinking that it was impossible to recreate. I guess that's why I didn't tell her. He pondered. She'll be back later, probably asking to buy a mithril artifact. If the Duchess wasn't so shell-shocked, then that was the first thing she would have asked him. Although he wasn't planning on selling anybody a mithril artifact for now because he had to make each one himself, he would definitely make an exception for his friends. Just then another knock echoed out from the door. This time it was Barnaby who came for a visit. "Aren't you managing the auction?" "Oh, we're taking a small break for now. There's only 2 more items left for the night, so I'm giving the major factions a time to prepare," Barnaby replied. "Anyway, I'm here to give you your prize." Barnaby clapped his hands, and suddenly 2 butlers came from the door, rolling in 2 identical tables to the room. "I present to you your first item, the mysterious tome." He took off the dinner plate-looking cover to reveal the worn-down book that looked like it had been seen much better days. Not a lot of people bid on this item because many considered it as undecipherable. The fact that it was missing so much of its pages meant that decoding it would be even harder. The Tower Master of Metropolis gave it a chance, and even he was unable to understand a single word. If the wizards who did nothing but read and study all day couldn't even unravel its mysteries, then practically no one could. So many thought its value was only as good as a decorative mantelpiece. But Michael knew different. He could already feel ChatJK4 stirring in his mind, wanting to absorb all of the hidden knowledge in this mysterious tome. "Can I touch it?" he asked Barnaby. "Of course. It's yours now. As we agreed, all of the things you bid on will be deducted to the total amount that you will get with the automobile auction." Michael slowly approached the tome with his hand outstretched and ready. His hands almost felt magnetized to the pages, as if it was welcoming him. But before he could touch it, he stopped himself. "Is this the right time?" he pondered. He had a feeling that ChatJK4 would ascend to the next evil after absorbing all of the knowledge in this foreign text. But he knew that he had a tendency of shutting down after every software update. He wouldn't wake up until the next morning or a couple days after. During other circumstances, he would have welcomed this immediately, especially since he was surrounded by his parents and family. But the auction still hasn't ended yet. There were still 2 items up for bid. His automobile and the 15 other drops of Sue. He didn't want to miss that. "I think I'll hold off for now," he decided. "If you would like to disable the emergency shutdown service during the software update, then please command me to do so." Of course, he knew that ChatJK4 wasn't really being unbiased about this. It was clearly yearning for new information. "Are you sure about this?" "Yes, Michael. Emergency shutdown only occurs to make sure that the software update happens as fast as possible. If you do not care about how long it takes, then there would be no need to undergo a shutdown." He was very glad to know that. But he still wasn't sure. "What happens after you start upgrading? Will you be unavailable?" "My services will be unavailable, but the knowledge bank stored in the software will be made available to you in the meantime." Basically, instead of being an AI chatbot, ChatJK4 would just become a normal search engine instead. It was still the same, but the process would be a lot more tedious, and he'd have to manually search for things himself. Okay, that's not a bad trade-off. "Alright, ChatJK4, you can have your snack." He grabbed the tome and immediately scanned through its entirety with one flip. Immediately, he could feel ChatJK4 churning in his mind. Progress to next update. 45.73%. Progress to next update. 70.29%. Progress to next update. 95.18%. Software update commencing. Then silence. "ChatJK4? You there?" There was no response. However, if he concentrated hard and thought of a spell he needed to cast, then the magic theory would automatically arrive in his mind instantly, as if ChatJK4 never left. Not bad. He decided to do this the next time he needed a software update. It was definitely better than suddenly collapsing onto the ground and being in a coma for a few days. "Are you satisfied with your purchase?" Barnaby asked. "Yup. Very satisfied, thanks." Then Barnaby moved over to the other rolling table with excitement in his face. "Now I'm sure you already know this one," he said, as he took the metal cover off to reveal 5 small vials, each containing a drop of Sue. "This is all yours. You deserve it," Barnaby praised. He walked over to the vials, observing them with a smile on his face. And without any hesitation, he quickly took out the cork and began pouring the drops onto his drone. Chapter 587. Offense or Defense? Chapter 587. Offense or Defense? One by one, Michael popped the cork out of the vials and began pouring it onto his drone. His endorphins ran high as he saw the translucent drops of Sue become absorbed into his mithril artifact. Finally, he had 5 drops for himself. He couldn't wait to spend them all upgrading his weapon into something even more powerful than it was now. He already had an idea about what he was going to prioritize first, but as usual, he was going to take his time thinking about it. He didn't know when or where he would be able to get drops again. "I can see that you're very happy with your drops, Michael. I'm glad to see it." Barnaby beamed with pride. This was one of the reasons why he started this business in the first place. By the way, congratulations are in order. I'm seeing a lot of people considering you and your Reborn company as the new top spot in the Rising Six. I'm guessing that they have to change the name now that you're there. This was good news for him because it would only put more visibility on their company, leading to more profits and having more people recognize the Reborn brand. Everyone's talking about your talents and your weapons. Who would have thought that you had a lot of mithril artifacts under your care? Haha, do you want to share with me the tomb where you found all of that? Maybe you have a few left in store that you need selling. I'm sure that it will be another hot topic in next year's auction. Barnaby's words were definitely in a joking manner. He knew that a treasure like mithril artifacts were almost priceless given how few there were in the world. I mean, sure. I'll have a few of them ready to sell next year if you want, Michael said with a smile. Haha. I will look forward to the day that comes. Barnaby laughed, winking at Michael. He thought that he wasn't serious. Anyways, I have to leave now. The next phase of the auction is about to commence. And in my opinion, it's the most exciting part. There were only 2 items left. The automobile and the 15 sou drops. These products were so valuable that Barnaby expected their prices to reach sky high, so much so that only the major factions could afford them. Barnaby soon left Michael's VIP suite and arrived at the bottom of the stage just a second later. The chubby man was that fast. Meanwhile, Michael stayed in the room and contemplated how to best use his new drops. ChatJK4, can I get the drone upgrade list again? There was no response. Right. I forgot about the software update. He had spent his whole life hearing ChatJK4's voice and got used to it so much that now it felt like there was a part of him missing. Oh well, looks like I'll have to check it myself. He closed his eyes and concentrated on what he wanted to find. And lo and behold, the list magically appeared in his mind just a second later. Upgrades. Mithril artifact. Drone. Spirit of old. 5-drop. Vision. Camera. Drone vision. Shared vision. Weapon. Unity firearms. Unity gun. Ability. Switch inventory. Propeller. Stealth. Muffled propeller. Speed. Double blades. Frame. Stealth. Camouflage. Invisibility. Defense. Unity shield. Expansion. Drones. Mini drone. Morph. Reduce. Enlarge. First and foremost, his head immediately went towards the shared vision upgrade. This would allow him to basically multitask with the drone, allowing him to pilot it and still be able to move his body simultaneously. It would be like he was seeing a split screen of his body and the drone's perspective. This would solve a lot of his problems with the drone vision, since it usually left him vulnerable and unable to move. Not only that, but the upgrade also allowed him to see the invisible aura of abilities. He didn't know how that worked, but ChatJK4 told him that it would be like seeing the world through thermal vision, except he wouldn't see heat but abilities instead. This was very useful seeing, as he'd be able to anticipate attacks ahead of time. All in all, he knew that he would get this upgrade no matter what. It was just too good. It cost him 2 drops, but it was worth it in his opinion. That would leave him with only 3 drops left. For his next upgrade, he was seriously considering the mini drone upgrade. The idea of having 2 drones under his control would be akin to having 2 people helping him during a fight. But the only thing making him hesitate was the fact that it didn't have offensive capabilities. It only had the camera function, essentially allowing him 3 sets of eyes if fully utilized. If he wanted it to have offensive capabilities, then he'd have to purchase the Unity Gun MK2, which would give him faster reloads and allow his mini drone to be able to use the guns as well. So if he were to get the mini drone, then he'd have to pair it with the gun upgrade, which in total would cost him all 3 drops. I'm torn. The mini drone is good, but I kind of also want the stealth upgrade. There were 2 stealth options for the drone's frame. One was just camouflage and the second was straight up invisibility. Of course, invisibility was the best option. The only caveat was that it cost 2 drops. Still, this invisibility wouldn't change the fact that the drone's propellers were extremely noisy. If he wanted the full package, then he'd have to pair this upgrade with the muffled propellers, which in all would cost him 3 drops. Should I choose offensive or defensive? This was a question as old as time. He couldn't decide which one he was going to get. I guess there could be an argument made for the stealth option. A lot of people did see the drone in action during the game. They know that it can fly and shoot unity beams. A lot of people completely got caught off guard with the drone since they didn't know what it was or what it was capable of. But after this auction, everyone knew its capabilities, therefore were more aware that it could be flying anywhere around the environment. The propellers will be a dead giveaway. As he thought about it more and more, he began leaning on the stealth option. This way, he'd still be able to keep the element of surprise with his drone. But it's not a rush. I'm still debating. As he was debating with himself, Barnaby was already down at the stage and began introducing the next phase of the auction. Ladies and gentlemen, I am sure that you have seen nothing like this before. This is an invention that will soon take over the world. It is something out of science fiction. I'm sure you already heard about its capabilities during its brief appearance in Metropolis, but I can assure you that you haven't seen anything yet. I present to you the Automobile. Chapter 588. Car Unveiled. Chapter 588. Car Unveiled. Soon after his announcement, a platform from below suddenly rose up into the air, revealing a pristine fours-seater automobile colored with black paint and had silver lining. The appearance of this automobile stunned the audience into gasped silence. They had heard rumors about the automobile and about how they were like metal monsters from another world, but this car wasn't anything like that. It was sleek, it was cool, and overall it was stylish enough that enamored everyone's eyes. They all thought that automobiles had to be this gigantic monster that could carry thousands of kilograms. They never thought it could be this small and compact, about the same length as a normal carriage with a horse. For all of you unfamiliar with automobiles, they are a form of vehicle or transportation that requires no horses, no magic, and no funny business whatsoever to operate. They simply need fuel, oil that can be purchased quite easily. This means that even the average man can drive it through the streets of Metropolis and even beyond. This pitch was interesting, but it wasn't enough to get everyone's attention. So what if it didn't need a horse or magic? They were all looking for the automobile truck, which was rumored to be able to carry tons of, or in a single trip. As for the sedan car, there wasn't that much interest about it as of yet. But as soon as Barnaby listed off its specs, that quickly changed. Now will you all believe me if I tell you that this car right here can go from Metropolis to Angora City within just a single week? This time everyone was surprised and immediately got up off their seats out of pure shock. Metropolis to Angora in a week? That was absurd. Even teleportation would take longer than that, given how a wizard had to recover after teleporting large distances. Is that true? How can it go that far so fast? It'll even beat the best horses in the world by a large margin. If it can travel that far, then does that mean that it has magic? It has to be. There must be a magic circle hiding under all of that metal. People simply couldn't believe that a vehicle operated through nothing but oil could even beat wizards in a game of who travels the fastest? Of course, Barnaby addressed all of their concerns by opening the hood of the car, showing off all its internal machinery, including the engine. This is what powers everything. As you can see, it just looks like a bunch of metal parts with strange shapes. But I can assure you that they are specially designed to transform a simple oil into a force powerful enough to send a human flying. He gestured for one of his assistant butlers to get on stage and enter the car. We will show you a glimpse of its power. Bear in mind that the sound is not made by an animal, a monster, or a magic spell. It is simply the same as the howls of tornadoes or furious winds. The butler turned on the engine, creating that mechanical rumbling noise that made everyone flinch. Soon after that, the butler pushed on the acceleration pedal, forcing the car to rev up its engines even harder. The high-pitched sound of the engine pistons shooting up and down thousands of times per minute echoed through the auction, drowning out any gasps and sounds of surprise from the audience. Tower Master, can you detect any kind of magic from the automobile? Knock once if you do. Silence. The Guild of Arcana basically confirmed that there wasn't any magic in the automobile. They would be the first one to protest if they saw any kind of deceit. I can already guess what you are all thinking. How does it work? Well, that is a proprietary secret from its makers. You only need to know that as long as you have fuel, you can get this car running forever. Barnaby then gestured for the wizards around the stage to start their presentation. The stage suddenly split in half, making way for a portal to a pocket dimension to appear. Down below was just flat grasslands with a straight stone road going from one side to the other. If you don't believe my words, then you better believe your eyes, Barnaby said, clapping his hands and teleporting the automobile down to the pocket dimension. Everyone had their eyes locked on the automobile with Barnaby's butler on the driver's seat. It wasn't long after that did the car suddenly accelerate from its starting position, reaching speeds previously thought impossible to achieve. The car sped through the straight stone road at maximum speed, with the driver never letting his foot off the pedal. The speed at which it traveled through the flat plains made people flabbergasted. That fast? I thought it was just a little bit faster than a horse, but it's just like an arrow. So the Metropolis to Angora City in 7 days isn't an exaggeration. It's a generous estimate. It wasn't long before the driver reached the end of the road. He quickly pushed on the brake pedal, letting the car screech into a stop. As you can see, this automobile is fast. Too fast, one might even say. So whoever obtains this car would be put in a mandatory class about safety and rules of the road. After seeing its speed with their own eyes, everyone was convinced. They needed this. Its speed and the fact that it didn't need a lot of maintenance like a horse or a magic spell made it very enticing to a lot of people. They now understood why Barnaby hailed it as an innovation that would change the world. And since this auction was filled with a lot of competent companies, they immediately thought of its uses in business. Transportation and delivery, for instance, was a big factor. This would be an investment worth spending all of their money for. And that isn't all. This is not just the automobile that is being sold tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please feast your eyes upon the behemoth that we call a truck. Another platform floated up in the air and revealed a much bigger automobile to the public. This truck was only a four-wheel white truck with a large container on the back. This type of automobile was very similar to a famous trope of anime and media in Michael's previous world called Truckin'. And given that he himself was reincarnated, he decided to use that generic white truck as his design. And unlike the automobile, this one fit the rumors of the metal monsters that the automobiles were famous for. Now this truck is not as fast as the sedan car. But as you can all see, Barnaby had one of his assistants open up the back of the truck, showing the large space inside. "There is enough room inside to fit an elephant," he joked. Still, the description was fitting. The container was way bigger than any of the carriages that they were all familiar with. And since it was made out of metal and was encased, it meant that the products being transported could be protected from outside intervention. Chapter 589. Automobile bidding starts. "Now will my assistants please deliver our items to the truck?" Upon Barnaby's request, muscular men with broad shoulders and chest came out of backstage carrying chunks of iron or on their back. Judging from the looks of effort in their faces, everyone could have a feel of how heavy those oars were. One by one, they began loading the truck with more and more oars. The oars have already exceeded what normal carriages can transport. And they're still going. I think they're filling it up to the brim. Are they crazy? Will it even move after taking in all of that weight? But as the space inside the truck got filled, everyone's doubts were quickly dispelled. Even though such heavy oars were loaded into the truck, it still hadn't caved in from the sheer load that it had taken. Normally, entire carriages would crumble at this point. "Let's take these for a ride, shall we?" Barnaby said, snapping his fingers and getting the truck transported to the pocket dimension. And just like the car, the truck started at the very edge of the road. The driver turned the engine on and pushed on the gas pedal. It wasn't long after that did the truck start moving at a pace equal to that of a horse's pace. Can still move after all that. It's even faster than a normal carriage with no passengers or load. Am I seeing it wrong, or is it still speeding up? The truck start may have been slow, but as it got going, its speed increased higher and higher until it was just below that of a normal car's speed. This baffled everyone. Even though the truck was filled with an extremely heavy load, it was still moving at a speed that only birds and eagles could achieve in the skies. "Now that you have seen its capabilities, it is time for us to talk business," Barnaby said, letting the stage close back up. "Now our seller is willing to auction up 20 of these sedan cars and 10 trucks in total. We will be auctioning them off as a set, meaning that only one company can obtain all 30 of these automobiles." Hearing those words got a lot of people worked up. People already knew that the automobile was something that even the major factions were interested in, meaning that once they joined the bidding, then practically everyone else was out of the running. The resources that they were willing to bid were far too much for even the minor factions to afford. Many wanted the automobiles to be auctioned off piece by piece. That way, other companies who weren't in the major factions had a chance to get at least one for themselves. Though this would lead the profits gained from the automobiles to be a lot less than what it would have sold for if it was tied up in a set. But of course, this was a business. Barnaby prioritized profits not only for himself but for the sellers of the items. So he chose to sell it altogether, knowing that the major factions would shell out more money for it. Without further ado, please start the bidding at 1 million gold coins. It wasn't long after that did the knocks echo out through the auctions. Meanwhile, Michael was barely half listening to the presentation of the automobiles. Although he'd get a lot of money for it, he wanted to prioritize the drone upgrades, or more specifically his dilemma. Still, he couldn't decide. Both options had their own pros and cons. He was so concentrated on thinking about it that he didn't hear Sheena calling out to him at the last minute. "Lord Michael." Finally, he snapped out of his stupor and turned towards her. "Sorry, what is it?" "I have been made aware that you have been called to a meeting with the Rising Six. They have been unable to reach out to you since they couldn't find our VIP suite anywhere, but our shadow orcs informed us of the situation. Would you like to accept, Lord Michael?" Normally, he would have declined since he wanted to concentrate on his drone upgrades. But after thinking about it, having a second opinion might enlighten him on some things. After all, they were pretty strong magnetics. Maybe they had some opinions on whether it was better to have offense or defense during fights. "All right, I'll go over there and meet with them," he said. Sheena then walked over to the wall and knocked on it. Just then, a magic circle appeared on where she knocked and created a portal to another pocket dimension, presumably a room where all the Rising Six had gathered. He thanked her and stepped on over to the portal, immediately transporting him to a large room with a circular table in the middle. The 6 people that were already sitting on the table looked towards his direction, surprised at his appearance. "Michael." Reptar was the first to greet him, immediately going up out of his seat and clamping on his shoulders. "We were trying to find you. It's good that you're here." Erlos came towards him too and offered a milder greeting. Then Fim and Tenzing, the two people he hadn't met personally, also got up off their seats and introduced themselves to him. It's nice to finally meet you. Fim from Angelic Crafts. The name's Tenzing. You need anything from the Mountain Movers, just say the word. He greeted both of them. And even though this was the first time he met them, it felt like he had already known them before. This was probably due to the fact that he already fought against their abilities. After greeting the two, he went over to Rena, who he was most familiar with out of all of them. Yet, instead of greeting him, she just turned her head away from him. Hello? Hi. She replied, keeping her face away from him. He thought they'd gotten closer after what happened during the game. But it looked like the opposite happened. She couldn't even look at him. Then Michael turned to Bo. And to be honest, seeing her so soon after the fight felt a little bit awkward. He held out his hand for a handshake and said, "Hey, it's nice to." And before he could even finish his words, Bo took his hand and pulled him closer towards her. He was completely caught off guard and came face to face with two mounds that felt like marshmallows. The other Rising Six were shocked into silence. Meanwhile, Rena had her jaws completely on the floor with her entire head as red as a tomato. "Hey!" she screamed, taking Michael away from her. "What are you doing?" Bo shrugged and pulled Michael closer again, burying him again in her chest. "What am I doing? I'm expressing my interest in him, that's what." Hearing those bold words immediately made Rena lose her words. "Wah? You." Bo looked down at him and smiled. "You beat me. You don't know how long I've been waiting for someone to do that. And now that I found you, I think it's only natural that I try to keep you for myself." Chapter 590, Bidding continues. Everyone was floored after seeing Bo act and talk this way. They had never seen her like this before. Ever. They didn't even think she was capable of liking someone, as she had always prioritized her work and her training. They would have expected her to get hurt or get angry after being defeated by Michael. But they didn't expect her to be infatuated with him. Think of it. "We'll be the perfect power couple," Bo said, twirling her blonde curly hair. "We'll be conquering Metropolis in no time." She wrapped Michael tighter in her grasp, making Rena go absolutely feral. Rena's entire body suddenly glowed with the power of her diva, before red sand started to flow out of her pockets and around her body. The figure of a sharp knife was slowly forming, with the red dust aimed directly at Bo. Whoa. The other Rising Six members quickly pulled Rena aside to stop her from making any bold decisions. Meanwhile, Michael, still with his head buried in her chest, had to respectfully decline Bo's proposition. Translated, that was, "Sorry, I don't want to become part of the pyramidic cuisine." "Oh, that's fine. Should I just abandon my company and go live with yours?" she asked, rubbing her cheeks with a far-off look on her face. She seemed to already be thinking of the future with him. He quickly pulled away from her grasp and finally took a big breath. "Sorry, no thanks," he said to her with his cheeks a little bit red. He'd be lying if he didn't say he appreciated the soft feeling, but it wasn't enough for him to change his current plans. However, Bo didn't seem all that caught up about his rejection. "That's fine, my dear. But you should take into account that I professed my love to you without any holds barred. Unlike some other people." Of course, understandably, this pissed off Rena again. What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean, Rena. You also have a SHHHH. The two women charged at each other, one trying to silence and the other trying to tell the truth. Seeing this, the other Rising Six members couldn't help but feel as if they were watching a comedy play in a theater. "What happened to them?" Tenzing asked, shaking his head. Puberty, Fim assessed. "It's only natural that women would want to share the genes of someone as talented as Michael." "You playboy," Reptar joked, smacking Michael's shoulder. "You should share some of that talent with us next time. You're hogging all of the mithril artifacts." Michael awkwardly laughed. "Haha, maybe I'll be able to sell them in the future." Of course, the others laughed, thinking that he was just joking. Reptar then grabbed Michael by the shoulder and pointed towards the glass window overlooking the entire auction. "Ooh, looks like the bidding for the automobiles has become a lot spicier." By now, the bidding had gone up to a staggering 300 million gold coins. And judging by the frequent knocking around the auction, it seemed that that number would continue to rise even further. 350 million from the Duchess Regina. Barnaby announced. "Do we have 400? 400? 400 from the Magic Tower. How about 500 million? Reptar tapped Michael's shoulders and pointed at the VIP suites at the top. "Look, Michael. This is going to be a bloodbath for the major factions. They'll fight tooth and nail for this bid, and I'm sure we'll get to see them in action soon enough." Michael, like them, was also excited to see the capabilities of the major factions. He wanted to see the difference in abilities between the low stages and the high stages. Maybe it would give him an idea on how to progress his own cultivation. "Sinclair's elixir has finally entered the bidding with 500 million gold coins," Barnaby announced. It was at this point that the knocks came only from the VIP suites at the top of the auction. It was a battle between the major factions. 800 million from the Quench Company, 900 from Gilderin, 1 billion gold coins again from the Duchess Regina. It was at this point that the bidding finally came to a stop. Going once, going twice decided. The bid is set at 1 billion coins. Does anybody want to match the bid and participate in the game? Barnaby asked. And immediately 6 knocks echoed out from the VIP section. All the major factions were participating in the game. Michael looked at Reptar and the other Rising 6. Why aren't you guys participating? At this point Bo and Rena finally stopped pulling each other's hairs and stood back up fixing their uniforms. It's because we aren't allowed to, Bo said. They're too strong and we're too weak. Is the disparity really that big? He asked them. Oh yeah. The minimum cultivation stage that they're going to use is in the 6th stage. And that's only if they used their weakest members. For this bid they'll probably use their strongest, so in the 8th and 9th stage, probably, Reptar said with fear and admiration in his eyes. Vim nodded. Yeah, they're in a whole league of their own. That's why I'm not even bidding this time around, even if I could afford to. Hearing that was very humbling. Michael was confident about beating those in the 5th or 6th stage. But as it turned out, 5th and 6th stage magnetics were more than plentiful in their companies and were even considered basic. By law, we aren't allowed to participate in games that are high level. Even Bo can't do it because she's the only one in the 6th stage while her crew members are only in the 5th stage and below. It's unfair how much more they have resources over us, Tenzing said, grunting. That's why you should have some more magnetics by your side, Michael. Like in this bid, the minimum magnetics that they'll require is probably around 4 to 5, Erlo said. If we want to compete with the major factions in the future, we'll need to not only defeat their leader but their major officers as well, Bo said, finally returning to her determined self. This gave Michael a lot of food for thought. He realized in this auction that it was important to have individual strength, but even more important to have a collective strength. Maybe I'll try to see if the Dragonborns can become magnetics. The competition will be even fiercer than last year. I heard that Alaric is already at the peak 9th stage of body formation, just a half step away from advancing to the next realm, Erlos commented. Coo. Michael immediately stood up and looked around the room. The Rising 6 noticed his weird movements. Michael? What's wrong, dear? Bo asked with worry. He looked around the room, narrowing his eyes. Did you guys hear someone laughing? They all looked at each other and shook their heads. You must have just been hearing the auction below. Let's just watch and see the bidding. They're about to decide how many players there are in the game, Reptar said, putting everyone's attention back to the stage. But Michael couldn't concentrate. Coo. Chapter 591. The voice. There it was again. That weird laughing sound. He could have sworn that he heard it somewhere around the room, as if it was echoing through the walls or something. ChatJK4, is that you? Coo. I'm not her. Immediately he was alarmed. His hairs stood on end. The fact that this entity could hear his thoughts was nothing less than alarming. He immediately tried to use his absolute unity defense to try and purge out the virus that was infecting his mind. But unfortunately his skill didn't detect anything malicious on his body. Even using his supreme talent to look at his own body didn't yield anything. Whatever it wasn't a living thing, or else it would have had some kind of light mana signature. Who are you and what did you do to ChatJK4? Coo. Did you already forget? That girl's busy with her software update. I didn't do anything. He knew that, but he just couldn't believe the words of an unknown existence suddenly popping up in his mind. What do you want? He asked with a threatening tone. Don't be like that. I just got impatient because of your indecision, that's why I let out my existence early. He frowned. What do you mean? Close your eyes and let yourself fall into your own consciousness. It's just like that time when you were awakening your new ability. Since it knew about that incident, then this entity was probably already with him long before this moment. It was either that or it read his memories somehow. And why should I do what you want to do? If you don't want to learn the truth, then you're more than welcome to ignore me. But sooner or later the truth comes knocking, and you'll have to deal with me either way. He didn't want to trust this mysterious voice that came out of nowhere. But there was no harm in trying. It looked like it wasn't trying to harm him or anything, or else it would have done so already. Alright. He closed his eyes and began to concentrate. And suddenly he felt himself transported into a void in space. There was nothing but darkness all around him, while he was just a bodiless voice floating in the abyss. And even though he couldn't see anything beyond him, he could feel a presence watching him from a distance. You got me here. Who are you? Who do you think? The voice asked back. This time its tone was a lot sharper, as if there was a real person talking to him from a distance. You're probably some sort of virus that invaded my system while ChatJK4 is on a software update. That was the only thing he could think of as to how this entity got to his mind. If ChatJK4 was active, then it wouldn't have let the stranger anywhere near his body. Coo. Nope. I'm not a virus. I'm not a computer. He narrowed his eyes. It knows computers? The only way that it could know about computers was if it was something brought on from his previous world. Who are you really? The voice laughed again. You've been listening to that girl for so long that you've forgotten your own voice. What? He sees something stirring in the distance. Something big was directly coming towards him, parting through the endless fog of darkness all around him. What do you? Just then he saw two large mechanical arms rise up from the darkness and show themselves to him. As soon as he saw this, he was stunned into silence. Those were none other than the futuristic mechanical arms from his own diva. Not only that, but he could kind of see an outline for the diva's body and its head. However, the fog of darkness kept the details extremely fuzzy, allowing him to only see blurry lights phase through the fog. And he could see that his diva was looking right at him with its two bright golden eyes. You're my diva. Kukuku, that's right. I am what you so call a diva. This astonished him to no end. His diva was speaking to him as if it was a real person. It wasn't long ago did he learn that divas could move independently from a magnetic. But as it turned out, they could do much more than that apparently. You can talk? Of course. Can you talk? He frowned. By the way that his diva was speaking, it was as if it was implying something profoundly shocking. I don't understand. Elaborate why you keep on speaking as if you're me. Kukuku. The diva arms pointed directly at him. I am you, you are me. We are one and the same. He immediately shook his head. That's not possible. You truly don't know anything about divas, do you? If you're so knowledgeable, then tell me. The diva arms spread its hands wide as if presenting itself with the highest of honor. I am the personification of your essence. Your drive. Your dream. I am the very core of your being, without all the distractions, without all the fluff. I am your pure desire. I am you. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He was his own diva? If you are really who you say you are, then why are you only appearing now? Kukuku. That would be your fault actually. You have gone through your life without any obstacles, without any desire to surpass your limits. It was only when you fought against other magnetics did you start to realize that despite your strengths you are still weak. And that led you to struggle to become stronger, to awaken your new ability. The connection, he realized. It's what must have allowed the diva to communicate with him on this level. If he hadn't fought against Bo and been forced to push past his limits, then he wouldn't have been able to awaken his new ability. I would have introduced myself when you started to upgrade your drone, but you were too indecisive. Thankfully that girl is still asleep and undergoing a software update, so I was able to sneak past her defenses and be able to contact you outside of this space. My space. He was still trying to process the information about his diva being able to talk. Nobody warned him about this. Who are you really? You know who I am. You know my name. I told you already. He began to think about his conversation with the diva, but nothing came up to him. Think further past in time. He concentrated trying to find the right memory when he finally saw a vision of the past. It was years ago, back when he lived in Kingsbridge Town before he established the nation of Reborn. Clicked. He finally understood why the diva referred to itself as the personification of his dream, his passion, his dream. You're my talent. My supreme talent. A smile formed on the blurry diva's face before clapping its hands together for his realization. That is right. I am your talent. I am born from your singular pursuit to make this world a better place. I am the harbinger of the future. Chapter 592. Harbinger. Michael had to sit down to digest all of this information. Divas are made out of talents. Now that he thought about it more, it made a lot of sense. In hindsight, it was so glaringly obvious that he should have figured this out a lot sooner. Divas took on the appearance, shape, and power of a person's talent. His supreme talent was harbinger of the future. That was why his diva had arms that looked like a futuristic robot with circuits for veins and muscles made out of synthetic fiber. As for his abilities, the switch and the reverse, those were just technological advancements that were in line with his desire to make this world have the same technology as his previous one. All this time my diva is just my supreme talent? I'm glad you understand it now. It is important for our growth that you fully understand what that means. As of now, your idea of me is very shallow. It's basic. You took the name Harbinger of the Future as literally as you could. That's why your abilities seem like it's time-related. But it's not. Our powers are more than that. It's much more powerful than that. You just have to understand me first. It was true. His switch stopped time and his new ability reversed time. These powers could be seen as a literal understanding of the Harbinger of the Future title. Then what should I do? How should I improve? You have to do what allowed me to connect with you in the first place. You need to break past your limits. Only then will your understanding of your own powers deepen. In moments of crisis, you will subconsciously seek yourself to find a deeper power. And therein lies the secret. Basically, his diva, or harbinger for short, was telling him that he should fight more, which was basically what other people already told him to do. Only through fights will a diva grow, they said. And it looked like they were right, since the answer came straight from a diva himself. Okay, I guess I'll have to ask for some sparring with my new friends in the Rising Six, he said, thinking it was a great idea. But it seemed that Harbinger had an even better one. Open your eyes and look at what you see. He did as he was told and saw that the auction had progressed smoothly while he was busy talking to Harbinger. Ladies and gentlemen, the automobile bidding has been decided. It will go up for 1 billion gold coins, with the 6 major factions competing to see who gets the privilege to settle the bid. Each of them has also unanimously agreed to send 5 magnetics through to the pocket dimension to compete against the other team. Barnaby announced, much to the fanfare from the crowd. It wasn't long before the teams from the major factions began making their way to the stage. Alaric and 4 of his best men walked down to the stage representing the Gilder & Company. Aerith and her crewmates were next, showing off the flag for Sinclair's Elixir. Then Bobby and his blacksmiths went down to the stage standing for the Quench Company. The 3 legacies were given large rounds of applause from the crowd. They were all excited to see them in action. Next were the Duchess and her Secret Service. They were people he hadn't seen before during his visit to the palace. But judging from the competitive looks everyone gave them, it seemed that they were competent enough to contend with the legacies. Next was the Order of the Heavenly Knights, who sent out knights led by the prodigy called Potbowl. Everyone was wary of the axe-wielding bald dude, especially since everyone knew that he was personally trained by Kruger, a Heavenly Knight. And lastly, the Magic Tower sent down their best wizards and mages. But strangely enough, they only deployed 4 of them, with 1 missing member from the bunch. Do you see their aura? Even without manifesting their diva, I can feel my hair starting to stand, said Erlos, shaking his head. That Potbowl guy sure looks innocent, but his axe swings are incredibly strong, Fim said, fixing his bangs out of worry. I sure am glad I'm not going against them, Reptar joked. And as much as he would like to admit, Michael did think that they were out of his league at the current moment. These were magnetics in the 8th and 9th stages of the body formation realm. Even with his advantages, he knew that he wouldn't be able to last a single encounter with just a single one of them, much less 5. You have to fight them, Harbinger said. What? This is your chance to sharpen your skills, to break the limits you never thought once possible. Immediately he wanted to disagree. How would I be able to break my limits fighting them? Their divas are 4 stages above me at the least. I would get it if they're only 1 or 2 stages above me. But 4? Don't you think that's a little much? TSK. Those guys are frauds? They really think those are divas? They're just empty shells. After hearing the clear disdain in Harbinger's voice, Michael wanted to learn more about why he thought he was superior to other divas. What makes you say that? They're soulless. They can't talk like me. He did have to admit that having a talking diva put him ahead above others. It was like comparing a human to a monkey. He could understand why Harbinger would think he's superior. But that's besides the point. Win or lose, this is your chance to fight against people at the top of the body formation realm. Just being in close proximity to them and observing their moves will allow you to progress so much faster than just fighting people at your own level. His initial reaction was to deny Harbinger's request. But after realizing that this was only a game and not a real-life situation, made him completely reconsider. This wasn't a matter of life and death. It was just an elimination from the bidding. Sure, he could get hurt along the way, but that was part of the process. And if it led to more progress with his diva, then a few drops of spilled blood was worth it. Also, he was very tempted with the next auction bid after this one. Even if he could just get 1 drop out of 15, then the risks were more than acceptable. Okay, I might agree with you on this. Of course you're me. But even if I want to, there's no way that they'll let me play. He could afford to spend like the major factions. But he couldn't fight like them. They had multiple magnetics under their purview. He only had himself. Immediately, the Reborn company was rejected from contention. As long as they decide to have 2 or more magnetics playing in the game, then he couldn't keep up with their bid. Come on. You know the solution to that. Michael looked down at his pockets. This could work. Chapter 593. Simultaneous Event. At this point, everyone in the Rising Six had their eyes directed towards the ongoing auction for the automobiles. The only one that wasn't was Rena, who looked at Michael and noticed that he seemed to be concentrating on something. Michael? She asked, nudging him. Michael opened his eyes and looked at the auction stage. Sorry, I was just resting for a little bit. What happened? He realized that the players on the stage were discussing amongst each other with hushed tones. This was highly irregular, as most players during a game would simply keep to themselves for the entire duration. If there were some interaction, it would only be limited to some small talk. This seemed different. Alaric, Aerith, Bobby, and all the other leaders of the major factions were gathered in a circle, talking amongst themselves, seemingly discussing something important. It wasn't long after that did they all nod at each other, as if unanimously agreeing with whatever they just decided on. Alaric then approached Barnaby and whispered in his ears. Barnaby looked surprised upon hearing this, but quickly turned professional and nodded. Then all the major factions players walked back up to the backstage to return to their VIP suites. Seeing this brought on a lot of confusion from the crowd. Barnaby quickly announced to the entire auction room to clear up the air about what was happening. Ladies and gentlemen, I have just been informed that the major factions have decided for the games to be a simultaneous event. Once he said those words, gasps and looks of shock propagated around the crowd. They clearly didn't expect the major factions to agree to this given how it could backfire on themselves. I wonder why they all agreed to this, Erlos said curiously. Michael was the only one who was clueless given that this was his first time participating in this kind of auction. What's a simultaneous event? He asked them. Bo quickly turned around and explained to him. A simultaneous event is a game that happens right after the other. In this case, the game to fight over the automobile bidding will commence as normal. But after that, they will immediately go on to the next game, which is the fight for the 15 drops of sue without any break or rest. After finding out the truth, he was also surprised just like them. Why would they do that? It looks like they'll just exhaust themselves if games are done consecutively, he asked. It's probably because they want to ensure that they'll be able to secure at least one of those prizes for themselves. Since there would be no time for rest, that means that players would have to be careful about using up their energy too early in the games. So if one company decides to go all out for the automobile, then the others could ensure that they'd be much weaker during the next game, therefore giving them a better chance to get the sue drops for themselves. Since most of the players were in the 7th to 8th stage of body formation, this meant that their fights would be a lot more intense, needing a lot more energy. This change in the game would ensure that not just one company could hoard all of the prizes and give a lot of way for strategy and planning. He could finally see why the major factions agreed to this. Then what happens now? The auction will continue, Bo answered. They'll be bidding for the sue drops next, and only after that will the two games start simultaneously. And just like she said, Barnaby set up the stage again, allowing 15 different small vials of sue to ascend from the underground. Each one contained a single drop. Since the drops are separated, this means that more players would have a chance to get at least a single drop. This is good for me if I want to compete against them. Barnaby then showcased the vials to the crowd and began the bidding. You guys already know how important these Spirit of Old drops are. Now we have 15 of them ready and up for sale. Let me guys remind you that this is the last bidding of the night. If you have money to spend, then spend it now. Let's start bidding for 1 million gold coins. And strangely, even though the sue drops were so famous and needed by every company in the world, there weren't that many knocks coming in. Usually companies would still bid in the lower numbers even though they knew that they wouldn't be able to win it. They were banking on the small chance that the major factions wouldn't be interested in it. But this time not a lot of companies were even trying to bid for the sue drops. Haha, look at everyone being a coward, Reptar joked. They're afraid of that simultaneous event. They know that they can't possibly win against the major factions in 2 consecutive games. What are you laughing at? You're not bidding too, Thim retorted. This time the minor factions knew their limits. Just from the money aspect alone, they knew that they couldn't hold a candle to those legacies and organizations as old as time. 100 million gold coins coming from the Gildren Company. 200 million courtesy of Sinclair's Elixir. The royal family enters the bidding with 500 million gold coins. Just the fact that they bid so high so fast was a stark reminder to the minor factions that they were still so far off from the companies on top of Metropolis. The bidding continued to rise, with each increment going up by 100 million with each knock. Eventually the bidding reached up to 1.5 billion gold coins. Divided by 15, this would mean that each drop was worth 100 million gold coins. Seeing this price only made it more apparent that the 5 drops he received were priced way under market. By comparison, the 5 drops that he obtained were worth only 300 million, which came up to only about 60 million per drop. That was a huge discount. Going once. Going twice. Declared. Alaric and the Gildren Company get the honor of the top bid. Barnaby announced, getting cheers from the crowd. Now who wants to match the bid of 1.5 billion gold coins? As soon as he asked that question, the same 6 VIP suites knocked on their tinted windows. Cheers and adulations for the major factions were spread aplenty during this time. Seeing such wealth being flaunted so easily fascinated the crowd. This was one of the reasons why they attended the auction in the first place. Seeing how rich they are really gets me all fired up, said Reptar. Hopefully I'll be able to participate in that auction in the future. Yeah, but spending that much will seriously deplete all of my money. I'll have to save up first before I can contend with them, Erlos commented. While everyone in the minor factions were talking about how they wished they could have participated in the game, Michael stood up and faced the tinted glass. Knock. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.